See? Knew you would understand.
Good to go? Okay, we are live.
As long as you still have it, you're looking for
The mics are hot, just so everybody knows.
Oh, great.
Okay,
Oh, good.
what I'd like to do, Mary Ann's got a hard stop at 2. I'd like to visit one additional item on the civic corridor, and then we'll move grant income up to be the next thing we talk about. On the civic corridor, Steve had made the comment that JR could talk to us about additional revenue possibilities out there. What are those additional revenue opportunities? Whoever I call, I'm going to be eating, so it just, there's no fair way to do this.
We'll let you know if you've got grain in your teeth. Right now, you're good.
They took a vote while you were out of the room and you won.
On the agenda. We used to do this at the college I worked at. We had put in some new fields, and actually they put in another new complex since then, but an additional source for potential revenue would be, like, we're already doing tournaments, that sort of thing, that would come in on the weekends, is concerts, festivals, that sort of thing. Obviously, we would start small. We would not take on a financial burden as far as what CROA is putting on the event. We would work with promoters, that sort of thing. There are some in the area that do this already, but it's a chance at a revenue stream. It really won't do anything harmful to the complex. I spoke with Jacob from New Leaf already, and the grass is not a problem. Any staging, that kind of thing that we would place down would have protective coverings up underneath it, and then it's the matter of the foot traffic on the actual natural turf. We wouldn't be doing this on the artificial. But it's something to look at. Like I said, it's not going to make $100,000, $150,000 next year, but it's a way to see if this can possibly work. So starting with something small and then building from there. And obviously doing it on our off-peak times. We wouldn't be doing it in the middle of the rec seasons, that thing, displacing them. We would work around their schedules.
So instead of events being downtown, they could be out there, is what we're saying.
They can, but these would be more paid, hard-ticketed events. So everybody who attends, it would purchase an admission to.
So it's like Sellapalooza.
So I support exploring this and doing this because we use our Girl Scout camps for third-party revenue when it's not being used, they're not used for us. And, sometimes you do really well with it, and sometimes nobody really cares that you're doing it, but it's it's a way to maximize the potential that amenity offers, and I'm a big believer in creating appropriate third-party revenue opportunities. I would support that recommendation.
I would too, actually. At a minimum, making sure that I trust that management and would make sure we have the insurance coverage and anything that we would, yeah, exactly, those are all normal things.
Yeah, there would be insurance,
Commission line that we would bring anybody else onto our property and to protect our assets. I would be totally in favor of that.
Let's hear every board member's opinion. David, yes, no? Is this something we should investigate?
Absolutely. Yes.
Kevin?
It can't hurt.
Vaughn?
Approve it.
Okay, we'll put, God help me, I got outvoted. Yeah, Joseph.
Very quickly, as representative of the Recreation Committee, this particular third-party rental aspect has been discussed for months, and every one of the Recreation Committee was for being able to bring other income in one of these ways.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
I don't think anyone's
it's already
against
been
that.
kind of on the table for a while, so it's good to hear that there are
Good.
specific plans that are being looked at so that we can investigate to bring that more income in.
Okay, for purposes of the budget, we'll put in one whole dollar. But we will charge JR to figure it out, we'll build a track record, and in the future, if this evolves to a repeatable amount, wonderful.
I agree.
Fair charge?
That's the way to do it.
That's a great idea, thank you. And I don't even mind paying full price to go to an event.
So realistically, what is a time, I mean, just because I don't have no clue, are we talking about something that would happen in the middle of next year, that could happen in the first quarter of next year? I mean, are we talking this could raise 10,000, this could raise 40,000? I have no clue. Or is this something where, Brian, we'll get back to the board as a whole?
I'd probably have to get back to the board. Like I said, we wouldn't do something that would interfere with the sports league, so we're probably looking at either prior to the start of, March or after, mid-May. And a lot of it would depend on, working with some local promoters, some management companies,
All right, work with Vanessa to come up with the time that we'll workshop this. How was that? Then let's workshop it in December or January or something. This is kind of how a game plan is starting to evolve, obviously involve the rec committee, and this is what it's starting to look like. Is that fair, board?
Sounds good to me.
Mary Ann, you're on.
Awesome, I just put something in my mouth.
Timing.
So I want to talk a little bit about potential grants income. Obviously, we will not put anything in this year's budget because it is a process to get that up and running and write them. I will say that I've been looking at park lighting grant opportunities, and there is actually a federal, I think it was a federal opportunity that should open up next year that is for communities, specifically for park lighting, which I had never seen this particular one before. It was closed when I found it, but it should open up in 2020 again. So I'd like us to explore that. But with regard to developing, there's grants that we can write through CCS, and there's other community grants that I think we can attack as CROA. I have to look a little deeper into that to make sure I'm accurate with that statement, but in my initial research and talking to some of my other not-for-profit gurus and about the designation that CROA has, there should be some opportunities there as well. What would be helpful to me in doing so is I would like to request that we form a small committee of people to work with grant priorities because you can research forever and find all kinds of things. I don't want to be doing that thing where you find a grant that looks cool, so you go after it and then try to figure out how you're going to implement it, because now you have the money and it really looked like a great idea, but maybe not now that you have the money. So if I would, I will probably ask how this is done, because I've done this before with you all, but I would like to put an ask out to the community to get some folks to be on a prioritization committee with me, or how would you like to do that, Brian? I mean, I need some people to be advisors and talk with me about prioritizing what we're going to research and try to do.
My wife, I know it because she worked a lot with the Salvation Army.
You're in trouble.
Well, no, I'm not. My wife and I agreed with putting Rita Roberts on the committee. And my point was going to be that my experience with grants is you have to have a working group, and sometimes you have to apply 2-3 years in a row. They
Correct.
get familiar with you, and this turns into something. So I actually think if it's going to be logical or done properly, we need a committee of the board, like we have a rec committee and everything else. We should put out an ask to the community for a half a dozen volunteers, because I'm sure there are people out there who've written grants who are very knowledgeable, because sometimes it's, in grants, it's not the one you thought you wanted, but the one you can actually get that matters, and then how you parlay it. So to me, what we need to do is put structure to this versus ad hocing it, or it'll die under its own weight immediately.
Did you just volunteer, Sandy, though? Is that what?
I would be,
Ron did, that's it.
I'd be inclined to agree, it's better to have a grants committee. That's why because I don't want to do this all by myself. It's the bottom line.
Why not?
But if we could have folks to help with the prioritization, and then, we will be working with the rec committee or whomever this, the grants are targeted at, as well as with staff, to develop what we need to develop for submissions, which, I used to do this for a living once upon a time, So I'm happy to lead the charge, but I would like a committee.
David?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. I think it's a great idea. Happy to help. And I also suggest that we do some cross-fertilization with the foundation, because they have a
Yes.
full-time grants staff member, and they have their own committee that's met once.
Would the board be willing to agree to have Mary Ann and David as the point people for this assignment?
And I happen to be on that committee.
Oh, that works, Susan, we can.
So that I'm happy to serve as a liaison to the foundation. But anyway, I just think one of the things I've shared with them is they may identify grants that are not appropriate for the foundation, but they can be eyes and ears for other entities, whether it's the CDD or CROA.
And partnership opportunities,
partnership-
because partnership grants are
absolutely.
usually far more successful than
Absolutely.
independence.
So I think there can be a win-win, or triple win.
I think we need to actually write up a committee structure.
A charge,
A
yeah.
one-pager that would go to a board meeting, that would form an official committee, that then leads to the ask.
Yeah, my recommendation is gonna be, let me work with Mary Ann and David. We'll put the objectives together, we'll send them to the attorney to write the resolution for us, and then we'll get it back to you. It probably won't be on the September agenda, but it will be on the October agenda then. And once we get the objectives done, we can put the all call out in October and hopefully get some names together for that October meeting where you can approve the actual resolution and the committee members.
We'll put $1 in the budget for this one, but if we get it kicked off, launched, and it bears fruit even in 18 months, it's worth it, I
Well, if you're
think.
using your CCS entity to go and secure these grants, you probably won't write anything into this budget at all.
I wouldn't write it,
It's
yeah.
Within the CCS.
I'm not arguing where to put it, because I think it depends on the
We
grant,
don't
how
know,
you think
we
about
have
it.
to, but I would definitely not anticipate any revenue in this coming. If we get some, yay,
Mm-hmm.
right? But better to be conservative.
Okay, anything else on grants, or next item? Okay, let's go to lifeguards. Are they a necessity? I'll turn it over to Steve in a minute, but for the sake of the audience, we got information from Blue Byron, who is our insurance agent. We've looked at other things. Actually, my personal opinion is what we've done with lifeguards is the worst possible answer we could have done. We've got what we call lifeguards part of this time at one, maybe two pools, and probably from an insurance liability perspective, we put ourselves in the worst possible scenario, because it looks like we're assuming liability for keeping everybody and everything safe when we're not doing that at all. So to me, we either should have lifeguards, or we should have pool monitors, or we should have nothing at all. Vaughn has volunteered to be a point person for this to me, so I love the fact that he did that. Sometimes I run into somebody who, and what I'd like is a board and an audience conversation around it, because really, when you look at the law, and I'm pretty conversational about this because of what happened at our club up in Baltimore and stuff like that, and Maryland changed the law that you've either got to have licensed lifeguards 100% all the time and everything, or you can't open your pool. But once you say, I have a lifeguard, and they're watching this pool, some kid dies, for whatever reason, we have assumed liability, and we chose to have lifeguards at Lakeside, and we didn't have them here, and, I've read posts, the lifeguard didn't show up till noon. Well, we have hours. I'm not even complaining. I'm just saying, you either need to be all in or not in. And that's Brian Kinsel's personal opinion. I'll turn it over to Nikki to talk a little first, and then let's go into a whole conversation.
Well, I'm gonna answer for Nikki, and then if there's any specific, if there's any specific logistical questions on lifeguards, then we certainly will ask Nikki for her opinion on that. But the question related to lifeguards, on whether or not we need them, the reason why lifeguards were implemented in the first place was because resident request years ago, and it was just at the one pool. So Brian, I think you've recapped it perfectly. It's not a necessity, it's just a service that you're offering to the residents. If you don't have to do them at all pools, you certainly can. I think risk, insurance folks are always gonna be as risk averse as possible. So I think that you definitely increase coverage of having a lifeguard at every pool, a greater chance of someone that can save somebody if there was an injury or drowning, but it is absolutely not a requirement of this community to have lifeguards. If you were to remove them from Lakeside Pool, you would just post a sign that said there's no lifeguard on duty, swim at your own risk.
We get sued because of a rogue sprinkler head. I mean, if we think our liability is not much worse on a pool with an implied safety thing, then we're terribly wrong in this situation today, I think.
Well, here's, I guess, nobody seems to be jumping at wanting to make this statement. I guess it goes back to once again, the level of service. The community has come to expect that there are lifeguards. If we decide that that is not the direction we want to go, I'm fine with that, but it can't be because we are decreasing our level of service. It needs to be because there's a liability, inherent liability, that as a whole community, we take on when we make those commitments. So I think we need to make two things. First is, if we have a level of service and there's an expectation, do we then, in order to mitigate liability, do we then have to do specific things in order to make sure that the lifeguard is certified, et cetera, in order to mitigate those, the liabilities? Or do we have to just say, we've been doing things the way they are, and this is what we're gonna do, and here we, I'm not comfortable with that direction. I think we need to do something. Either we step up our game and make sure that all of our lifeguards are who they are supposed to be, or we don't do lifeguards because there is inherent liability that we undertake. So,
In the lifeguard business here, it is highly competitive because of the tourism market. I mean, we're competing against every hospitality industry, the theme parks, the hotels. So it is very challenging for us with the labor pool.
Yep.
We just raised the fee by a couple dollars an hour, so it definitely adds more challenges.
But we're
In high turnover.
so what you're saying is, even if we say we want to have lifeguards at all of our pools, we may not be able to hire
Might not be
lifeguards
able
at
to
all of
find
our
them.
pools because they're not available.
Right, and you may be better off
At the rate
just.
that we're paying.
Right, and you may be better off just contracting that out to someone that does lifeguard, like we'll go out and bring in an entire lifeguard crew for you.
Why
Your
did we
expenses are
choose-
gonna go
And
up.
then
drastically.
you also spread your risk a little bit when you
You
do
do,
that.
right.
So-
I think when Brian, you and I talked about this briefly, my other half, he's in charge of, I think, 400 lifeguards. So him and I have we've been talking about this a bit at home. This is our fun conversation.
Sorry.
I'm somebody that is level of service, we've always had them, so on and so forth. And so he started looking into a couple of things, and he said, hey, it's like, so we're Jeff Ellis, if I understand correctly. They do the certification for our lifeguards. But are our pools reviewed by Jeff Ellis? Do we have everything a lifeguard needs to properly do what a lifeguard is known to do? And he threw out a couple of things, and he brought up that, yeah, he probably thinks it would be a liability if we're not doing them correctly, and we're not doing them at all pools. It's an all or nothing type of a situation. So I think it's something that we need to listen to the community for a minute and recognize that if we are going to increase, the conversation is potential to increase our dues by a big hike. Would part of that be because we're going to insure every complex and lifeguards will be contracted out, or whatever the case is, to really do it right, or nothing? But I do agree that it might need to be an all or nothing kind of a situation, because we're stuck in between a hard spot between we've always given this and we've always provided this and we don't want to take something away, but we also don't want to have our community and our residents in liability. And
Why did we only pick one pool?
Again, we've always done it this way thing. It's just at some point in time in history.
Is it
residents
volume
have
of
said,
use?
That's what we had
Is
the
it
license,
volume?
that's what we did the lessons,
Well,
we're
no,
always at
it's-
Lakeside, that's
It's your
why.
premier pool, it's the one that's up front in the downtown area of the community, and was the decision that was made by request to have lifeguards.
Even there, we don't do it the whole hour there.
No, it's
is our insurance, do we have any idea if it would be more or less, with or without?
Well, if it comes down to the Jeff Ellis specifics, I will let Nikki talk about that, because she's a lot more vested in.
For those of us who have no clue what Jeff Ellis is, start with that.
So, Ellis, we have a yearly contract with them, and that contract includes the certifications with the lifeguards as well as audits. So we get audited 4 times a year with Jeff Ellis, and they basically ensure that we have the appropriate documents Okay, sorry. The appropriate documents completed. We fill out zones of protections for the pools, so Spring Park as well as Lakeside have it. The reason why Spring Park has it is because there is a summer camp, and we do guard for the kids at summer camp.
And now, at Lakeside, we only have one lifeguard at a time, right?
Correct, it's one lifeguard with the aquatics coordinator.
And his feedback to me was there's something about a visual. So Jeff Ellis, based on their location, are they actually able to go ahead and do the proper scan and all of it in a time frame that is appropriate? Or the way he was looking at it, just in his experiences, they actually need two, but that's how they would do it over in, that's how Volcano Bay is.
It's a
So
little bit different with the locations, but our pool has been approved with Jeff Ellis to have one lifeguard on
Okay.
property at all times. It completes a zone of protection, which is 10 seconds to
Right.
recognize, 20 seconds to get to the guest.
Right,
How many
okay.
See, I would have never known 10 and 20 seconds.
How many pools would we need lifeguards at?
Every pool.
How many pools we got? Five pools.
And then Artisan is the
And we
sixth
don't
pool,
know.
but Artisan's
So-
not lifeguard either.
So would it,
But because of Artisan then.
It is still a CROA pool, even though it's in the service.
So can we tell Artisan that part of their insurance liability, that because we are now lifeguarding all of our pools, do we have the ability
Mm-hmm.
to tell a service area that they must have that?
I believe you do.
I would guess, yeah.
I would think
That
yes.
is not,
If that's your man.
that's not going to play.
Well, I'm just,
They have already made, the Artisan Park Committee has reviewed this a couple of times, at least that I'm aware of, and they made a conscious decision to do what Brian was talking about. It was better to have no lifeguard, post the signs, pay for the insurance, and not pretend that they were going to have some level of service.
How did it affect the insurance?
It had a nominal effect to my.
I don't
Decrease.
think, because we're already buying the insurance.
Yeah, I don't think.
We've already got the coverage in place. I think the real place you're protecting yourself is if something happens, the lawsuit side of you provide these here, you didn't provide it there, or you only brought the person on at noon, this happened at 11 a.m. or at 11 p.m. I mean, to me, I really honestly believe we either need to be 100% committed or get rid of it and and what Vaughn really agreed to do was take the legal lead, working with town hall to say, all right, what would the signage and everything need to look like so that we properly cover ourselves
I
and
think the
make
insurance companies have
Yeah.
requirements for pools if you're not going to man them. I'm sure the signage is very clear on what they would require in order to cover us, or as a policy.
How much money is in this budget right now for?
58,000.
The total amount, though, that we'd be talking about. I don't know if all of that would be saved or
58
not.
for what we have right, well,
Well, the
55.
lifeguard line is
58 for the-
lifeguard, so,
Have we tossed this around with the recreation committee at all?
no.
I think this is more of a legal issue too.
Yes, but for representatives of the residents overall, their opinion could.
if you don't have,
That's the 58,000 is for just the pools that are covered
We
now.
do have a.
Right.
so that's two.
Maybe two.
But I would recommend.
But-
Or one, actually, it's one. And once in a while, they have on Spring Lake. So you've got to double that, at least double that.
So what,
Triple it maybe.
I would just rename it.
if you did full coverage, that means no resident could be in the pool unless a lifeguard was present. Is that correct?
No.
No, it
It
would
would
be at
just
your
be
own
during
risk.
posted hours. So if we said
this is
lifeguards will be there from 11 to 8, then we'd have to have lifeguards there from 11 to 8.
Okay. So what
I
would
be-
absolutely do not agree with that statement based upon what's going on in Maryland. They actually made them shut the pools when there wasn't a lifeguard there because you either assume the liability for your pools or you don't.
So wouldn't that be helpful to say, if the pools are open, the lifeguard will be present, what would be the full cost to fully staff and make sure we have the appropriate equipment?
be high.
I think we're either talking, right now, there's 58,000 in the budget. I think it's either gonna be zero, or it's probably gonna be a number like 150 to 200,000.
200.
200, if you're closer to
Let's
200.
multiply by
quite
5.
frankly.
Yeah.
So I have a question, because when, I live in West Village, so there's the pool in East Lawn that's not covered with anybody now. Does the card work 24/7 to get in there, so anybody, if they have a card in their hand, that's time limited? So I guess a question I have has to do with swim at your own risk is swim at your own risk, and I get that. And what about I mean, what happens if you have an 11-year-old who has their parents' card and just goes in there all by themselves and something goes wrong? Do we have monitors at least to say you're not of age to be in here, you can't go away?
That would be an increase to this budget. We don't have that budgeted to have someone sit and check cards.
That's it, but we do have a go-around.
But it doesn't happen at, that's just a concern for me because I've worked with kid industries. But I do agree with you, it has to be kind of an all or nothing, I think.
If we decrease lifeguards, will we be interested in increasing park monitors?
I think you'd certainly have to have us look at a schedule of having someone be there at the pool during pool operating hours. Now, right now, our park monitors are only there afternoons to evenings, so we would definitely need to increase it all day. So
No, I understand. I'm saying if this budget for lifeguards of $58,000 was not applied to the lifeguard at Lakeside, if we applied that funding to a second or third or however many we currently have, park monitor to do rounds throughout the community, that also helps us look at things like the Lakeside issues that we've had with security. So if we increase a presence that's roving around the community with that funding, we got to give and take somewhere.
So you're looking for level of service,
Level of service still
level of
having-
service, if we're not gonna have the pool monitor, are we going to at least
How do
have more
we
people?
still have,
I think there's, as a mom who's far beyond having kids in pools anymore, I guess my biggest concern, thinking back to that age, is if I was specifically going, which I do know moms do this, they specifically go to Lakeside because it is lifeguarded. And for whatever reason that may be, judge or not judge, doesn't matter. The reality is, that is a service that we have here in Celebration, a lifeguarded pool. In the summertime, Spring Lake is covered, or Spring Park is covered. Again, because the kids are home for the summer, and we even extend our lifeguard hours, knowing that kids are gonna be there. So I guess it goes back to that whole level of service. Are we going to do it or not? If we're not going to, I don't think that the play of, well, we're gonna go ahead and just have more park monitors, I don't think that's gonna cut.
I'd rather keep lifeguards in general. That's me. But we want to do it right.
I think the danger of putting lifeguards some places and not others ultimately becomes a bigger problem from a liability standpoint. And I think whether your pool is large or small, you've still got a cost. It's one person to run it. You've still got this, the 58,000 really could be multiplied by 5 or 6. And I think if you're looking at, for example, Artisan Park with 600 rooftops, asking them to absorb the cost of over 600 rooftops for $58,000 in lifeguards would be a real game changer in their budget. In a perfect world, we would have a lifeguard everywhere. We're not in a perfect world. I like the idea of having an increased monitoring presence, not because it's lifeguarding, but it's just a presence that says we're around and we're doing something with that money. This is not a cost savings decision. This is a liability decision. The world is changing, and we can no longer afford to have some lifeguards but not others. I think it goes back to Pine's original point. We're in the worst of all possible worlds.
Just a question about what a monitor is. If we had a monitor, would a monitor be full-time at a pool, or would they go around 4 or 5 different pools, driving around? They would watch other things, but they would check pools to...
Check IDs.
I think it's a check ID issue, because I think that if we just rename it, residents who are gonna sue are not stupid, they will figure it out. Just saying, if they're already suing over a sprinkler head, they're gonna say, well, you just renamed your lifeguard a park monitor. Well, that doesn't mean you just mitigated your liability, it just means that I get to sue you for more because you tried to pull it over.
But they may just be there 5 minutes.
roving.
Because they're rotating.
And it's more than just pools. It would be parks. It would be stepping into the restaurant, making sure it's clean. Hey, make the phone call if there's an issue. Whatever, a presence.
It
So it would be
certainly
a
is,
shift of
certainly the community and the amenities are expanding, and one person hitting all of them, they're not
That's a
gonna
bit
be able
much,
to beat
yeah,
that every.
that's a bit much.
Right, so to split it into 3 or 4 quadrants and find the coverage for that makes a lot of sense.
Are we back to, I think the original issue was about liability though, right?
By doing that,
I think we need to get hold of the insurance company and just see what they say.
Can we, okay, as a suggestion, we had a brave volunteer, Vaughn. Can we have him work with the appropriate people at management and put together a recommendation for the board to review? We have clearly said we have a concern about liability. We've clearly said we're not trying to make this a cost saving, but a best way to manage service along with liability exposure for the community.
So you're looking more from management and your insurance provider to give a liability recommendation?
What coverage, what they were required in order to cover us.
And I guess might be even a follow-up to that, which would be more of a legal issue than an insurance issue, because an insurance company, I'm sorry, they're not gonna be looking, they're gonna be looking at selling us insurance, sorry. I think that legally, by doing this, do we truly decrease our risk of getting sued because of this, or do we actually open ourselves up more? Back to your point.
So you're asking for a legal opinion on
I,
the matter?
based upon the materials that Lou Byron provided, I absolutely think today we've got maximum liability exposure.
But do we also review potentially with Tom?
Well, that's-
and ask
I'm-
for legal
I'm-
opinion?
I'm not trying to limit the conversation.
I just feel like, I don't want to make a service decision based on one
vendor.
person's
That's why I'm asking for a
Yeah.
paper.
I think we need a paper, but I think we need to reach out a little bit beyond and check with our CROA attorney. As a homeowner association attorney, he would probably have a very good breadth of knowledge as to who's getting sued and who's not, and what the ramifications are within the different situations.
Okay,
So-
it's in Vaughn's court.
But part of that is, what would, isn't the insurance question is, what would be the ideal coverage to protect us the most? So one might be fully staffed, and the budget implications of that
Yes.
is $300K a year. Or no staff, I mean, those might be equal.
We got 11 million in insurance protection today. I mean, we have a lot of liability
Yeah, but
coverage.
if you have a loss of a kid's life, that $1 million, not only is it, it is
Forget about the dollar
irreplaceable.
amount.
It is
I'm not-
irreplaceable, but $11 million will be nothing.
No, I can guarantee you're wrong on that statement.
Okay.
But,
I don't want to be.
I just don't want it to
tested.
happen.
well, no, I've seen these settlements before. But given our homework assignment, by the way, if someone dies today and we're providing lifeguards, we're in the worst position today. So we need to get ourselves in the right position. Okay, security approach and cost. Todd Haskell.
My turn,
It'll be a breeze after that.
Thank you, Nikki.
So,
Thank you.
I know we've talked about all kinds of security. The one thing that I had brought to y'all attention was the use of bollards instead of gates to limit access after hours. I went and got pricing, and I found a company that we've used to make our parking lot lights. So they tailored if you can see that, I know Jackson can see it. A little tiny thing right there is a bollard, made out of aluminum, it's lightweight, it would be easy for our staff to insert into the existing sleeves in the ground, and then remove in the mornings.
And it screws in?
It sits in there, and it can be locked down. So the total price for 5 of them is $1,323.
Oh.
So I would think that would be an easy
That's
move.
an easy one.
That's within my
Lot cheaper than
spending
security.
threshold,
Yeah, that's
so I can
an
make that
easy
happen.
decision.
So we would just have to update our policy on, closing the park at the certain hours that we already have established, making sure our staff is fully aware of, when to put the bollards in, when to take them out.
How long does it take to get those made, Todd, you know?
We're probably looking at about 4 to 6 weeks, because they're custom.
And how long does our security contract go to?
Through December, I believe.
I think
To the
it's
end of
the
the
end of the year, right?
The end of the year?
So we can have a
Can we
transition.
get out of that, or is that, we have to keep that?
I think it was a 30-day cancellation policy, but I think,
I'd have to look at it. Do you
I
know
think it was,
off the top
I
of
think it
your
was,
head?
we looked beforehand, it was a 30-day cancellation, but they may have to, they may adjust the rate, I think is what the contract said.
So we're not
Yeah.
considering that yet, though, right?
No.
We're gonna move forward with the bollard purchase and look at, making sure they're installed when the park's closed.
So a couple of questions. We have to go through TCC, right? I'm guessing for
I would say
an
not,
approval?
because we already have existing bollards that just aren't utilized because they're so heavy.
Okay.
This is
And
more of a decorative bollard than what's existing.
Where do they get located?
They are right as you cross the little bridge, you have the pergola on the right.
Uh-huh.
The asphalt changes colors from where we've sealed
Yeah.
it.
Our side.
Right there, there's 5 holes in the asphalt. That's where it
Okay.
would go.
So just out of curiosity, we've been blocking the bridge from the front.
Yes, we have.
Which is actually a county road.
It is. That portion is.
Is.
Are you going to turn us in?
I'm just curious. I mean, I know that was a hot topic around the fountain with Lexington, and a lot of people. So when I found that out, I was a little shocked. And
Well, we're gonna do it on the other side of the bridge.
The ballot,
No, we don't even have to take the, we can still keep that.
Yeah, we can still keep that.
We don't have to change anything, we
We
just
can
are
ask
trying
for
to determine.
forgiveness on that one, and
Yeah.
The whole
Yeah, it's
purpose
just-
of blocking and where it's at
We'll
was
find
to
this.
prevent cars from pulling down through there and then having to back up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
I
would
just-
say we'd probably keep the gates where they're at.
it's not our road. It's
I'm gonna feel
unsightly.
real,
It's-
we're gonna come looking for you if we get caught tomorrow, so.
I've been talking about that for a couple of years now. It's ugly.
Well, but I think it's
I understand the purpose.
well, but it's also a safety thing, because what happens if all of a sudden they continue going forward, now they have to back up because the bollards are there, at least you're catching them before they turn down. And it's a sign that says residents only.
I understand entirely. I'm just saying, we
What-
can't sit back and see that Lexington is getting, called out for something.
What
And we're doing
solution,
the same
what
thing.
do you think would be a better thing
just-
to do?
I'm just saying that it's not our road that we continually block off.
I hear you, I would love to change it. Do you have an idea that we could remove that and prevent what it's preventing?
There's no right answer. I'm just saying that we need to acknowledge that this is not our road, and we're blocking it off.
Okay.
It's not ours, and we're doing it.
So what do you do when the bollards go up and there's already a car inside and now they're ready to leave?
The park monitor would have to clear the.
They come through at the
Area.
close and
They
the
don't back
monitor
up.
does, and you clear it out.
They just have to back up.
And if someone had parked there because they're eating in town,
Oh.
Right.
and they come and the Uber.
I think it's private property. You could actually call a towing company for
The
that.
park is
can't
now
you?
closed.
Yeah. I mean,
You
the park
could
closes at
What is
11.
Put up
that?
proper,
It says no
put up
parking
proper
after X, Y, Z
signage
o'clock.
just put up proper signage that says
all
the
there.
park is
Yeah.
going to be closed as of X o'clock and you will not be able to get your car out of here.
Until it reopens.
And then they'll have been notified.
And before we install them, make sure we let residents know that this is coming or this is happening, so they're all made aware.
And then decide.
Flashes and vaccines and all that.
It's easy enough
Who
to
put
do.
those in initially, Todd, on that side, do you know?
CROA
The
did.
original bollards?
CROA did?
CROA, yeah.
Did we go through somebody? I
Yeah,
mean,
they went through
Yeah, they went through
TCC.
the whole approval process and went
So
through.
it's already been
the-
approved in the past by.
It was.
Okay.
I wouldn't ask them again.
Okay.
If the
I don't
holders
think
are
they'll
there,
care.
it maintains to be approved unless
Well,
they tell
then-
you to take those holders
You
out.
open Pandora's
Yeah.
box.
Let's not
No,
open it.
But I don't think
Yeah,
it's.
right.
Don't go
approval.
begging trouble,
Just go.
people.
Okay, bollards, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about cameras, because that's the other, especially when we talk about some of the pool stuff we're talking about here. Where do we stand with all our quotes and expansion and all the wonderful junk?
Arnie Field.
Yeah, everything.
Come on over here, Patrick.
Is it cameras gonna cost $1,323 too?
Yeah, you said you wanted one camera, right?
If you had extra copies, give it to the audience.
Thank you, sir. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Pick Ryan up off the floor now that he saw the price.
I guess, why are you surprised? You saw how much some of this stuff was coming through?
Yeah, I had faith.
Oh, okay.
That $100 a person wasn't looking so bad now, huh?
Well, this is working, You would come out as a good question. All right, take it away.
So Patrick put a lot of work into this. I have, he did signature.
Did you give the audience copies? If you got a couple extra copies?
Make them suffer too.
And if it ends up on Facebook, we can blame those two.
So we had CJ's signature and Stanley. This is the Stanley documents. They were very thorough and,
Apparently so.
yeah, based on the price, it should have been. I'll let Patrick start talking about the VMS system. I'm more of the hardware type person. He's the software junkie.
So, with prior conversations, we've had the discussion on upgrading the current platform that we're using. And right now, we're using what's called a DVR or an NVR, and that's just a basic recorder. But it's sort of old school. And with the advancement in technology over the years, colleges, government buildings, and so forth, they're using what's called a video management software or system, VMS. And so I went out and I did the research, and I reached out to other communities, reached out to some schools, UCF and you know, FAU, and just some Valencia as well. Reedy Creek is also using some of them. So did the research and came down to the top 3 that are on the market, the ones that have had some sustainability throughout the years. And so you come across Avigilon, Genetech, and Milestone. Avigilon has been, they've all 3 been in business for some time. We've narrowed it down based off of the usability of the software and basically the features. We've narrowed it down to our recommendation, which would be Milestone. Milestone is used by Reedy Creek, it's used by UCF, and there are some government buildings that are using that as well, and so we felt comfortable going with that. So that's one part of it.
Okay, go ahead.
And before you move over into their suggested installers, which is how we come over to CJS Communications, Signature Systems, Florida, and Stanley Security.
So describe what this software actually does. I mean, are we talking about new cameras here? Are we just talking about software? What, the where and the what? Paint a picture for us.
Okay, so when you take a look at what we're using right now, it's not very responsive. It's when
It's
something
obsolete.
happens. It's exactly. It's
I
when
mean, just
something
so no
happens,
one's confused.
We go over to the software and we try to locate based off of the complaint an issue. Whereas a VMS, you can set this up in so many different ways where you can have alerts emailed to you. They are manageable by web-based browsers as well as applications on your mobile devices. Most likely not tablets, but a mobile phone of sorts. And you can set up smart searches, which is at Lakeside past between the hours of 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. any movement
So,
as far as you can set
so
up.
just for the board here, this is what I'm thinking, and I need you to tell me I'm correct. We just had a lifeguard conversation or a week talking about the athletic fields here, but we have the ability with this here to have someone monitoring from here at the office if we wanted to, what is happening and checking stuff. So we've talked about monitors driving around, but you could literally, if you think, this is true, we could have
Computer screens.
we could have screens on a window, and people could actually sit here or something and watch and help monitor from right here, see people. If kids broke onto the field somehow, some way, we could have alerts coming from that and everything. So that we're talking about a bundle of money here, there's no lie there at all, but it would actually be part of our security, infrastructure, support, management process. Did I state that truly or not?
You did. During the day, obviously we'd have to talk about level of service, who's going to actually sit there and stare at a screen looking for something, but that's why you have your alerts set up for areas that might have high traffic. Classic example, I forget, East Village as an example, that's not as heavily used as Lakeside or Spring Park, which there's no question there. So you could just set up a tickler for East Village to say, just alert me for just movement. And it's something, it might become redundant to have like a constant tickler being alerted to your mobile device or through an email, but you can at least see that there's activity there. You can look up at the screen and say, okay.
So
no,
go into
Patrick?
Vanessa's, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask, does the system allow you to send does the one person or the one, can the alerts be spread across different people?
So
Like, let's say somebody's tasked with watching the East Village area.
Yes, it
Can they get that versus everybody getting it?
yes, you can have it to send to just one person, or you can create a.
So
an
each
email.
site can have its own setup for who the alert goes to?
I don't think
Like-
so. Each side, I think it would just be all encompassing, so.
I think what she's asking though is, for instance, let's say we have 3 park monitors working, and I'm using this when we get bigger, right? 3 park monitors, we have one in Island Village, we've got somebody over down at the field complex, and we have somebody downtown. Whoever is charged for watching East Park would get the alert, not the person that is over here in Island Village.
You could set up an
Okay.
email
Okay.
group
Okay,
Yes.
where they
that's what
all.
you were asking.
And I think in some
Thank you,
ways,
Vanessa, for interpreting Mary Annie's.
in some ways, I think having it go to the group, and this detail could be worked out, but I think going to the group, because then they can make sure another person actually saw it, because we all know what it's like to get a text and then not see the text. But to me, this solves Vanessa's problem or question a little while ago when she talked about the 8-year-olds who get their mom and dad's pass and go down and they jump into East Village. If you got 3 8-year-olds coming in and you get this alert coming, you could have a park monitor over there pretty fast if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It is very sophisticated, and if, in the future, if you want to expand on it, you can link it up with your access control system, so it can tell the person scanning that card whether it's little Johnny or little Johnny's mommy, and which one is actually supposed to be in that pool. What I found quite interesting about the whole system would be some savings of time for Patrick when it comes to, say, for instance, the dog park. Go back and find out which dog dug a hole or whatever. It's so sophisticated, after we watched the video of it, that if you put in, what is it, the algorithms or whatever, I saw this guy in a red hat do so-and-so. I want to find out what he's been doing. You just click on it, type it in, whatever, and it will follow every single camera we have on property and stitch it all together and tell you exactly where that person's been at what time.
So
It's like the machine.
Fantastic.
So when we made, when we made the decision to buy Weathermatic, we said the software would be easily upgradable, so that what we were really doing was spending money that was putting a base in place that we could continue to enhance. Is that the correct statement here?
Absolutely, yes.
Question.
Go ahead.
You're talking about $250,000 on this. I see the Celebration Fields complex, I really see that as pretty important because obvious reasons. The pools, if you're talking about, I don't know how much trouble we're having with the pool areas themselves where it would justify the cost, maybe we do, I don't know. But the pools, if you're talking about monitoring a child coming in to the pool area unattended, a lot of times the kids go out, and their parents are already there, the kids will go out with the card to go to a car, go to, whatever it happens to be to get something, and then they come. How are we going to determine whether or not we got to shoot somebody over there every time a child goes into the gates?
You'll have a larger pan, so you'll be able to see.
Yeah, but nobody's going to be watching that all the
But
time.
is that really going to be our goal, though?
I
Right.
think that is the goal. At this point, I mean, we have the opportunity in the future to do that.
This is about
I think getting this
safety.
implemented is basically being able to find out what's gone on after.
But who's
the
going
fact
to be,
at
if we're
this
not
point.
monitoring all the time, what good is it?
No, I haven't.
Deterrent.
Seek deterrent.
But it's also planning for the future.
It is.
It's better from a
If you got the
financial investment perspective to do all this now than piecemeal it, because it's only going to get more expensive as you piecemeal it, and you may or may not be able to, I mean, that's just my business opinion. This is a lot of money,
that we don't have.
but it's a capital expense. What's the ongoing expenses related with it that we will absorb after this initial expense? That's kind of the bigger question to me.
Right, so I do know that there is some funds set aside in the reserves to tap into some of these costs. And what we also looked at was rolling this out in phases. For sure, a VMS, the video management software, is needed, and that will go across all facilities. So that will that's a requirement.
Can we piece it in stages?
Exactly,
You said?
and so that's where we're going with the different phases. And initially, we said, definitely get the VMS installed and get the athletic fields implemented, because there's nothing there at the moment. And then we can also take a look at moving forward with, what was it?
I think so,
Lakeside. Lakeside, that desperately needs to be upgraded, so at the same time, take a look at getting some of those cameras replaced, as well as extending that by the basketball courts and the tennis courts way down there. Prior conversations, we all know that. And that will be phase one. That will get the VMS up. It can use existing cameras, regardless of how they're in place right now. So,
What's the, I mean, we have in here a lot, electrician costs not included in the price. I mean, labor costs, I mean, is it gonna double these prices for installation?
No, we don't believe so. The $72,000 for Lakeside Park was our best guesstimate, because Signature did not come in with the electrical pricing, but based on my conversation with Stanley, their systems that they wanted to put in, which are similar, felt like a $72,000 for Lakeside would be a all-in deal. Once y'all make your decision, we obviously will get it narrowed down to a contract price, but the numbers that you're looking at here on Signature, which is the one we recommend, that is replacing existing cameras as well as the VMS system. The first two, Celebration Fields and Lakeside Park, are expansion and all new equipment. So that's why you see the lower numbers there. Expanding on those in the future would be, what was it, $900, $500 a camera?
Real quick.
Is that,
$544.
the cost of the software itself, is that rolled up into that very first one entirely, or is that spread across these amounts?
It's spread across those amounts.
So if we were to, let's say, buy the software and have it installed and do the first two items, the field complex and Lakeside Park, what would that number look like? Because that would then, you just have to, I guess, roll it out of where you have it spread across into, how much basically is the software itself?
It depends on how many cameras you have there, because you have to buy a license for
each camera?
system. Yes.
Do they have an up to number, like up to XYZ licenses, or?
Well, take for instance, Celebration Unleashed. That's $9,000. That's for 5 cameras plus the VMS system, all inclusive there. So that kind of gives you an idea of where 5, say $600 a camera, that shows you exactly how much the VMS system is running, which is.
And once again, if you're still looking at Celebration Unleashed and you're taking a look at the line item for Signature System, it's $9,000.
Okay.
So why,
That's also including the cameras.
Okay, now, so what's the ongoing cost for the licenses then?
The licenses under Signature has I believe it was somewhere around the 2,000 or 3,000.
Per license or per the package?
And that's looking at a total package. So I can go in and say, well, we only have these many licenses based off of, we only have the athletic fields as well as certain, but you want to take a look at it's the number of licenses per camera.
So why does one cost $219,000 and the other one cost $126?
Yeah, some
Oh,
of the numbers
I was
are,
looking the other way. I was looking at what is Stanley doing?
Well, no, I'm looking at this first.
I know, but I was looking at why are they so much more for some of these versus Signature? And then I guess to Brian's point is, why is the other one so much lower?
So each
something wrong.
Each VMS is held by, it can only be installed by one provider. So Stanley Security can only install a Vigilon. Signature System only installs Milestone. If they decide that they can also install other software, but that's usually how it goes. So we started off with the VMS, and then we selected our vendor based off of.
Hey, Patrick, do you mind, real quick, to the entire board getting here, because I had the same question, and I didn't understand it completely until Patrick explained it to me, so if you guys don't mind, let him just tell you one more time here.
Yes,
It's
please.
proprietary.
Required.
Correct. You start with your VMS first. Once you selected your VMS, you let them tell you who their suggested installers are in your specific area. So when we sought out with Avigilon, they basically came back and said, Stanley Security also does that, when we did our bids. Milestone came back and said, these are the different areas, and Signature Systems installs our software, our hardware in that area. So that's why you have varying products and varying prices. Avigilon has proprietary equipment, so they can charge as they see fit. Milestone uses access cameras, which have been in business forever, and they are not cheap, but not expensive and proprietary. You can use them across the board.
Which is why we don't have to replace a lot of our cameras.
So why 126 versus 346 then?
Under Avigilon, for
Or
CJS
CJS.
Communications, CJS Communications only provided the VMS and, what was it?
We don't think they figured out the whole scope that we were looking for. They didn't put as much effort into it as Signature or Stanley, and they just give us a bulk price, which we all know was way under, so they didn't quite understand the scope, and they weren't real willing to come out and really put that much effort into it, so we had them as a third bid, but
So you don't think it's real?
it's not real. Definitely.
I appreciate you guys running through this. I really, really do. I don't know if I'm still in sticker shock or what it is. But that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
That's
Yes.
a lot of money when we're looking at a budget that we're looking at, when we're looking at the survey that's coming out for where playgrounds might be able to go, and to turn around in the future and say, we can't put a playground somewhere because I don't know what the right answer is. I wish we could do it all. I'm gonna have a hard time with this.
I don't know if we really have a choice with the fee.
I don't know, certain areas, but as a
whole.
as a whole, $200,000 to $400,000.
This is not crazy pricing for this, though, I'm telling you.
No, I'm not saying it's.
I mean, but that's what we need to, like,
Well, you have
now we
to
need to
find the
think
money.
about.
I see the value.
Where does it fit in the priority scheme is what.
Can I offer a
the question
suggestion,
is.
though? Can we, maybe if we go back and we just take the complex and doing the VMS, the Milestone VMS, and just break down those two prices, and then we'll get what we have already put away in reserves to offset that, and then that'll give us a greater picture of what future cost looks like, because we already have some money that we have available from reserves, which isn't maintenance and operation at all. And that may be something that we can approve at the October
Let me
meeting.
just ask, how would we use reserves, replacement reserves on a new asset?
Because we're replacing an existing asset.
It's an
Yeah.
existing
Well,
asset.
It's a good question for the buying the VMS, but it is replacing something that's outdated.
So you guys are all okay with using replacement reserves
Yes.
for?
Well, no. Replacement reserves for part of it.
Okay.
Because you're replacing cameras and stuff like that. So I think it's a combination of replacement reserves and working capital. It's not a small number. I had not seen this number before. It was just handed out either.
CCFC, there are no cameras at the
Right, that's,
CCFC.
right.
But there are down in Lakeside, right? We have
Yeah,
cameras
but-
down there. I think I'm okay in
Are we playing
parts.
three-card money?
Well, no, be perfectly clear. At a pool,
Yeah.
it's a replacement
I got it.
reserve.
I got
At the
that.
athletic fields, it's working capital beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Okay,
I agree.
that was my point. I think this is
It has to be
working
separate.
capital, and I think we ought to look at it as that item from working capital. Any other items would be replacement, and then make a decision. I don't want us to drift over into thinking that we can move one.
But I also don't want to mislead any of you, since I spent time looking at our current capabilities, they are not good. So just said, we have a not good situation today, so we need to at least start thinking about how we balance it out.
So to give a better example, look at the first two, 73 for Celebration Fields, 72 for Lakeside Park. 73 would be a capital, 72 would be a reserve.
But the VMS is included in that.
And
so
then
it
it's
has to be
split,
pulled
so it has
out.
to be divided up and.
Yeah, I
or
think we're
whatever
gonna
pulled out,
actually have to
whatever
have
it
it
is.
itemized so we.
But in either way to look at.
Can we agree to have, okay, question then, can we agree to have them work with Milestone to break this into more detail for us? Signature, okay, yeah, for the milestone, sorry, so that we get a better understanding and more detail of our options and everything, so we can talk about it and think about it?
Out of curiosity, what is in reserves roughly?
I just am looking at our 2020, our 2019 reserve, and it's 41,000 in 2020, 2022, 2024. So we've got 40,000.
40 each year.
40 each?
No,
Each year or just-
every other year.
40, that's what I'm saying, 40 every, so 120 in total.
Well, in, by
That's-
2024.
No,
Yes,
the
yes,
specific
yes.
question is 40 times 3.
Yes.
So we've got 120,000 in
So
replacement
this could be a
reserves.
project planned out over the next.
And all we
four-
would be doing, to be clear here, all we would be doing is accelerating that if we made the decision now. Because remember, we said we keep $1 million, and we'd be putting monies in, replacing money would go out, that's why we said we did it. So if you spent the 220, 120 would be reserves and 100 would be working capital,
Okay.
predominantly.
And just to clarify too, that 40 doesn't stop in 2024, it keeps going.
It keeps going in, but we would also spend, it's really, that was gonna be one of my questions, is we almost need to look at this as on a replacement cost basis into the future, what would we have to do, and then our run rate cost basis, we need to understand.
Absolutely.
And final question, just with this, with Island Village being built out in the center over there, could this be shared with them? So say this is the software, if we go through with it, this is what we're putting into all complexes, this is what we expect from you when it gets turned over.
I think you'd have to require
Set
it,
the
yes.
expectation.
We can't force them, but we can really try to encourage it.
Yeah, we set the expectations, the same thing,
This is
so we
what
don't
we're
run
putting
into
in.
the same thing we ran into with
With-
Well,
Spring
let's
Lake.
put it this way, they're not gonna put it in the system we have now, it's obsolete. So,
They
we're
might
gonna
not do
have.
anything. And that's where my money is. That's
You
where
and I
we are.
unfortunately are thinking the same thing, so if we set the expectation.
Then there was assessments that we start charging when they do the black, what goes to this.
So we're looking at what the different costs are and locations for phasing it,
Correct.
as well as the source of funding, whether it's working capital or replacement reserve for each of those items.
It's the only way to
Get
do
you
it.
up and running immediately, it would be, what's the VMS cost? Can that be covered with the 40 that's already there right now in reserve dollars? And then what do you need to come up with extra to get the cameras at the
Again, we got 120, we have 43 times, we can accelerate that way. I mean, that's the conversation we had, because we said some items will move up, some will move back, because you're gonna spend it once, because obviously you're not gonna be replacing it if you replace this now. So you got 120, and you got 100 of working capital.
So it's kosher to accelerate replacement?
Yeah, it's no different than if a roof was supposed to be replaced in 2022 and you had to do it in the fall of 2020, you're just accelerating
But if
that.
you need it.
And we also have items that push back, because we won't change our funding level, so we're replenishing it, it's just, that's why you keep that $1 million pot.
The things you learn on CROA.
So just to be clear, we'll come back to you next, not this coming board meeting, following board meeting or workshop, and we'll give you signature systems, detailed pricing, what each VMS costs at each location, plus,
Labor.
yeah, the final numbers for Lakeside and.
Do we want to take
CCE,
action at the next board meeting is the question, not September, but October. Do you want to take action on the VMS and the cameras at the athletic complex?
I think and my personal opinion is, we need to take action for at least, at a minimum, for
Lakeside and the fields.
For the fields. We have, I think that's
For a
imperative, we have
4
nothing there.
For a $4.5 million
Because there's no point buying something into the obsolete system. So
Absolutely.
we need that first and foremost.
Correct.
What's the lead time from the time of signing to completion? If we sign today,
Absolutely, we said that.
Don't know the
How long
answer
do
at
they
the
take?
moment. I
We didn't
hate to
feel
say it
unless
and
we've covered.
fall on my face. I would say, to get them up and running at the athletic complex, based on electrical and stuff like that, probably 3 weeks, but I don't know what the availability is.
Tell you what, we have 2 workshops in October, let's put an update on one of those workshops.
So just a clarification, if you're pursuing signature is significantly lower than Stanley on 4 items.
Right.
Just to make sure that they really understand the scope of work, I mean, just to make sure that we're not getting something less than what we really expect,
We'll get them to sharpen their pencil.
But can I,
And based,
because it's really a lot lower.
but it's
Based
two
off
different
of-
systems, though.
there are 2 different systems, 2 different license packages. Sometimes with one license, you can attach 2 cameras to it. So everyone has their own signature way of putting their quote together. That's why it's hard to do literally a side-by-side comparison. You can only really do that with, say, the cost of this camera and that camera. Side by side, one's higher than lower, but how they operate.
I think in conjunction with the thought process is, you chose Milestone versus, right?
Yes. Yes.
For signature versus the other one. Was it because of the pricing, or was it because you believe that that is the best system to go with?
We believe that Milestone, based off of the features that it provides, the scalability of it, and, costs come into play as
Right,
well, but
okay.
we did not make a decision based off of cost. It was
So,
based off of
okay.
the software first.
Okay,
What
in which case, having the
That's
big
wondering
difference in
why.
Stanley wouldn't really matter,
Yeah.
because you still would choose Milestone
Right.
anyway.
Right.
Okay,
And a Vigilon had a much higher annual fee based on license usage.
got it. Okay, thank you.
I just want to point out, we're moving in the wrong direction.
This is not operating funds.
Ryan, Debbie had a comment. And I think this is the first time you're officially up here too, so.
Debbie Jackson, 413 Sycamore Street. Just got a couple questions, okay, because if I don't ask them, somebody else will ask me, did I ask them? Okay, number one, if you do put the cameras at Lakeside, does that, help out with that 58,000? Then you're gonna get that 58,000 that you're spending on lifeguards, et cetera, if you've got the cameras up there. But the biggest question is, and this is just me, I'm not clear as to per year or per month, whatever you're being charged, is it per camera, or is it per, park, or up at the fields? Is it one charge per year, or is it per camera? Because I heard you say something about if we put them at the dog park, there was 5 cameras, which I thought was a lot, but,
Right, so there is a cost per camera. There's a license fee per camera, and that's rolled into here. So you're looking at the cost for, over 100 and...
But I think she's also talking about on a run
Oh,
rate going
Oh, the
forward.
run rate going forward, too.
And the, it's called a care package of sorts, which is a protection plan for the software and cameras. That is a yearly cost of about $3,000.
That would cover everything?
No, it's not everything.
The
So-
care package.
Okay.
That's an ongoing maintenance
Yeah, that is an
operation.
ongoing maintenance that covers updates, that covers
Physical
software updates. and-
damage to the camera?
Okay.
But what about annual
For the whole
licensing?
package, if we have 100 cameras, that covers that.
112, correct.
Based on our 112 count.
112, okay.
But now, if we are scaling back our number of cameras, the price comes down, but per camera, it might be going up.
No, he's saying
No,
the 3,000 was for 112 cameras. So
It's really cheap.
Correct, but
When you
but
look
if
at
it's
the whole picture.
3,000, is it still gonna be $3,000 is my question, if we only have 75 cameras, is my question, is that,
No, it would,
Okay.
as you go on. Yeah.
okay.
All right, thank you.
There's one brain, if you will. Is there one brain, is VMS the brain? Am I getting that right?
Correct, well, VMS is the software.
hub.
It's, each location will have.
Each
its
location
own-
gets a hub.
Right, and they all.
Is there cell data that needs to be added onto it or anything else as well?
No, what you want to take a look at is the bandwidth at each location. We do have some courtesy spots that are going in. They may not be sufficient. These are those free locations.
So is there a couple things we gotta look
Some
at?
of our existing locations, we're already on a contract, but I think there are 3 locations, which are East Village, North Village. There are 3 locations which would require increased bandwidth. We're on the DSL modem, it was just the bare minimum just to keep.
So we should include that in your thing.
Yeah.
And on Debbie, on your first question, I absolutely thought that 58,000, even if we go to monitors, this software going to the monitors helps become part of our protection.
Reflects in the budget.
In my mind, at least.
Let me, can I ask one other question about this? If Artisan Park wanted to participate, could they do so? I noticed that none of their facilities are listed here.
Definitely can.
Is there a reason why we, and I don't have an agenda, I'm just trying to find out, is there a reason why we didn't include Artisan in this?
I do know that they were recently upgraded, what was it, 2 years ago, maybe a year?
I think 2 years ago, but it's not a VMS system, is it?
It's not a VMS, what they're using is what we're currently utilizing.
So
that's,
again, I just want to be clear. What we're saying is that if we were to embrace this entire package, all of Celebration would be under this package except Artisan Park, which would be under the old outmoded system.
Which we're not monitoring at all for Artisan Park. They're
So-
monitoring
yeah, they
They updated that.
That
They
actually,
did
They didn't update it to a VMS, that's my point.
Right.
so this actually goes back to a bigger conversation, because I think your point touches on how we were talking about lifeguards. If we did lifeguards everywhere, we wouldn't force it just on the 600 owners in Artisan. But now this conversation is actually opposite, where this is something that CROA would be doing at all amenities but Artisan. So I guess at the end of the day, we have to recognize that Artisan Clubhouse and Pool are owned by CROA. And we need to, on a bigger scale, determine what's appropriate for CROA to say and do for that facility
Yeah,
versus not appropriate.
It raises a very interesting
Yeah, I
question.
don't know what the answer is, but I would like to see you bid out the Artisan facilities so that
I
we know
think-
what those
We're
numbers
gonna
are.
I think
definitely.
we need to ask
Yeah, we need
Artisan
their
first.
permission before we can.
Yeah.
I do need their permission to ask that before we do it?
Because it could be an expense that we tell them they have to do.
But it's
Well,
that's where it's,
It is, but this is one of those obstacles, I think, by having separate management companies running the.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with management,
Well,
with
let
all
me
due
just,
respect.
but if I could just explain, the reason why is because when we were managing Artisan, we had those cameras to where we could monitor them here also. Now we don't. They've gone out and bought their own system, separate from our system completely.
And don't they pay their own insurance for the pool itself, right? The whole
They
clubhouse
pay
and
their
pool area.
proportionate share of
They pay
insurance.
So we need to be very clear here. They pay a portion of our insurance, and if somebody dies in that Artisan pool
reflects on
swimming,
every-
they're going to sue our butts.
The lifeguard question is completely different,
Well,
because you're saying cover all of your pools. if
No,
you're
I
renting, you
understand,
have to include
but
that.
we can't pretend like it's totally different from a liability perspective, because I don't think that's a correct statement.
I think there's a, there's a precedent question here as we look at Island Village about whether or not these larger communities within the community, a service area, if you will, how much we want uniformity around things like cameras or lifeguards. I don't know the answer to this. I really don't know what's the right thing to do. But I think it would be useful for us, if you say we need permission from the Artisan Park Committee, I'm glad to, as a liaison, to go back and ask for that permission but I don't know what the big deal would be to just get the bid on it. But maybe I'm missing
The
something.
reason why I'm saying you need permission is very simple. We don't have keys or access or anything to get in there. They do. They have complete control over that with their management company and their
that might be a
committees.
concern though, if that is an asset of CROA, if we don't have any keys or any access.
Well, I mean, if you're telling me that you just need access to the pool to be able
Right,
to do
that's the
your.
permission level. It's just, we need
I mean,
them to let us. have-
We're not enemies.
I know.
I mean, so let's be collaborative here and see if we can, I'm perfectly happy to ask for permission to let you come in and bid it. I don't know that it means we do it, I just think we need to know.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
knowledge.
Jackson, I completely agree with you. But if we just went and did it without asking
Okay.
permission, that would cause probably
I
more.
got that. But I think we should at least ask that question. And then as we roll over into Island Village, I think we're gonna have to ask that question again. So it's a good time to be talking about those things.
I think Island Village, we tell that question.
Well, and I think the biggest difference is that Island Village isn't gonna be managed
It's set up yet.
separately. It's gonna be part of CROA, so we'll have, say over those cameras and what's going on with them.
So the answer is
Okay,
yes.
do we have a game plan? Everybody happy?
Yeah.
We can definitely get with the artisan folks.
I guess-
We needed
I guess my only-
cameras.
But it's probably better just, if you could just get back to us with an email and say, yeah, good to go, here's the dates and times that they can do it, and
Can I guess, I don't know if we're on the same page or not on this one, David. I guess my ultimate concern is, we are now putting this on a workshop for something that we have an unprotected asset for. We don't have any cameras or anything at all right now at Celebration, so I think we just need, I'm concerned about the timeline, right? If we wait for another 2-3 weeks before we actually talk about it again, and then we get the signature, I mean, I guess I'm just worried about this dragging on a little too long.
we
So
can
let's
be
set a
prepared.
time.
I think we can be
Let's set a
prepared
time that we
to
have
bring
to
you
have
an
that.
action item in October to purchase the VMS system and to buy the cameras for that complex.
I think that I would rather have an action item rather than a,
Well, you can still
A
discuss in October the other questions that you had regarding the other cameras, but I think we can pull that separately and be prepared to have that as an action item in October.
I think that's my personal
with you
opinion.
on
I don't
that,
know if
yeah.
anybody else is in the same page as me.
There's no reason
or-
to drag it on. If we can make a decision at a workshop and we have all the information, why not just
I'm
make
just
the motion at
I'm
that
just
point?
concerned we have an asset that doesn't have any protection at all.
And we
Right.
discussed 4 months ago that we didn't want that facility open without cameras.
Well, and to be,
We also,
okay,
but we said that,
and to be perfectly clear here, let's just say this 7273 is right, that's working capital funds, and we know we got 120 in the other. We're getting close to the point where we can do the whole damn thing if we wanted to. We have different opinions here, but I'm very much a proponent of doing the whole thing once we have a little bit better facts, just because I think it provides us protection as a board, especially as we think about certain other decisions.
And do we need to wait till October board meeting, or can that
Well, can we
be
do the
folded
first?
into September's board meeting, which is next week?
Well, no, we're not talking an October board meeting, we're actually saying the first workshop in
no, but
October.
he's saying, can we do it even sooner?
I'm
How
saying-
quick, yeah, can you do it, can we do it
Can we,
next
can we
week?
get that phase 1 or 1A sorted out?
By next Wednesday.
Put it on the board agenda
Well,
now before.
when are you gonna post? Huh?
Thursday.
By Thursday of this
This
week,
week.
so we can publish the board packet, but Wednesday for y'all to
Well,
have.
no,
Let's
we
put
could,
it on the-
we
let's
could
put it on the
publish,
agenda and
we could
remove
put it
it.
on the agenda without the supporting material and disclose this supporting material appropriately at the meeting and discuss it
Yes.
at length.
My biggest concern, though, that I need you two to answer is it easy enough for them to pull out that VMS quote separate from the mix that they've got here?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
because they're all individual.
Okay, good.
So, yes, by the board meeting next week, we can have, it can be on the agenda as long as they let us throw it on there. So we'd have to have the information by Thursday, is that?
No.
For our.
Get it on the agenda, have the information that the board can have it, say, by close of business Monday, so we can read it on Tuesday, and at the meeting, we will expand during the agenda session, the actual motion.
We'll make it work.
Is that fair with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just fast forwarding, when you're doing this sort of, or getting a quote for a facility like we're gonna own in 2 years at Island Village, is there any way of getting a quote at this point? Because that will come to us.
Yeah, our biggest problem is we don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, we don't.
We don't even know.
We kind of know what it is.
But it's
But my
maybe
point is-
changed, maybe not, we don't know for sure.
Could this start to call the question as they build that facility? Because this will be on them to put in?
Well, we
They don't
can,
have to.
you know what, we've got Lakeside, we could tell them this is what Lakeside cost, and tell them this is what they should plan for.
I mean, I'm just trying to think about them, and this is their responsibility to get this ready to turn over to us.
I think once they bring it back to us and show us the conceptual designs that they're going
I'm
through
just-
TCC
I
on
know
the
it's not a real expense
1690.
for us. I mean, we're trying to get them to,
Well, I would certainly,
needs to be done.
when we start having that conversation with them on where they're at with that planning process for it, I'm telling them we would have an
Talk to them.
expectation.
All right, David, this is what I'll offer you. Bennett is supposed to, he had asked for 5 minutes, Bennett is supposed to be at this board meeting, to give an update,
Okay.
and then you fire away with your questions and go right there with it. Is that fair?
Maybe fair to David, I don't know about fair to Ben.
All right, sports fans, we're not even halfway through yet. All right, Todd, landscape
Thank
management.
you.
Maintenance, whatever.
thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Landscape maintenance. My computer's turned off, we've been sitting there so
Well,
long.
at first, are there any specific questions related to landscape maintenance or anything specific?
Just the one I
about-
brought up at the beginning, asking Todd a questions about breaking down into 2 or 3 contracts,
Yeah.
if that would help.
I think that, and then I think in conjunction with that is there something that we can do in order to help increase the level of appearance within those rocky areas? In addition, is it an issue of more fertilizer? Is it an issue of, what, this turf right here it's just all weeds, we need to just replace it?
Well-
we just need to know those kinds of things too.
Sure. I'll even go slightly different on you. I mean, we've knocked 255 down to about 210. We've got a budget of $820,000 for landscape management. Are we spending it intelligently? Do we have to spend all that? I mean, are we landscape management, are we shooting perfection and wasting money just because we're trying to satisfy what we think people want? I mean, $820,000 is a lot of money, so what do we really, what do we?
Sorry, just a clarification, because I saw Susanna come up. Is this budget including the service areas? Because is there a separate fund
For landscape
separate
there.
service
Yeah, that's
area
separate.
budget?
I just came up because we were talking about landscape in general, so.
The
Just so-
performance.
Just, can we clarify what his landscaping is?
Landscaping here means CROA expense. We are going to look at service area and service area budgets as a follow-up.
Conversation is not about service area landscaping at this time.
General
Yes.
town landscaping. Thank you.
Yeah, so go
No worries, thank you.
Well, if you have a question about service area landscaping, Susanna's available to answer that question also.
For the perception, it's probably best to keep them separate.
Yeah.
All right.
We'd love to
Lots
have
of
you.
questions there. So overall, when I did the landscape budget, and Steve and I and Susan went through it, I went back and I did an overall reduction in the landscape and irrigation line items, because basically you have the contract, which is the contract, then you have a landscape item for a plant dies here and there, hey, get that replaced right away, and then you have irrigation. So things break, irrigation parts need replaced. So I did an overall reduction. I based landscaping at 5% of the contract price, and I based irrigation at 3% of the contract price, or $100 minimum. That gets you $2,100 a month for irrigation repairs, which we're ranging anywhere from $900 to $2,200 a month for repairs throughout the community. And then that gives you about $3,158 or $3,160 for Brian for plant replacement here and there. The reason I did the overall reduction, one was to help for the athletic complex to make up for that expenditure, which was
77,712.
yeah, so it would have popped up to, and did an overall reduction of about $54,000 if you look at the numbers.
So the 820 would have been about 875.
Yes.
And so just for clarification, the contract is the contract, so we budget for that across the board, and then his percentage increase is for out-of-scope work that would take place for plants, landscaping material, and irrigation.
And the main reason for that reduction I'm comfortable with, because, I have to back up what ends up getting done here, and I don't like egg in my face when I'm sitting here talking to you guys. I'm confident that the plant installations that we did, all the renovations we did last year of like $100,000, those proved very successful. We have just small areas that need some improvement due to age, and we have the reserves for those items. And as you know, in the reserves, we also backed out of a $100,000 number to come up with like 25 for arbor work and then 75 for landscaping. So that way, you know where the trees are being worked on, where the landscape is being worked on. So I'm comfortable with these numbers. The overall level of service, some people have beat me up because I put in there 100% weed-free in the scope, and the way I've tweaked it moving forward is 100% weed-free at the time of detailing. That means if I go to that park and they were just there and I find a weed, I'm gonna be upset. There shouldn't be one. 3 weeks or 2 weeks later, yeah, there can be a weed because weeds grow.
So why is 100% weed-free an objective? Why? Why not 80%? It just seems like we're shooting for perfection, and there has to be a cost for that last 10% or 20% or something. I mean,
I think it's like the speed limit. You say the speed limit is 50, but people go 70, so you gotta really make it 100, and you'll get 80.
Well, let me turn it for you. I had an inspection not too long ago, and within that inspection, it said that there are weeds in the flower bed. I just laughed and said, you know, it's funny, there was one, and it was on the side of the house, and there was one, I wasn't even kidding.
So take it out.
One. So my question is in turn, what is how does management review it?
So the contract, though, we already have the contract. If we want to talk about changing the scope for the new contract and reduce it to 80% weeds, then that makes sense. But we can't reduce that cost for the contract per se.
And when's the contract expire?
Next year.
One
End
more
of
year,
next
right?
year.
A full year. So let me put it to you this way. Todd,
Before we get there.
please do.
The question I think that we were trying to determine is what determines why are we going to 100% weed-free, not 80%? My question is actually to management. How do you look at single-family homes when the inspections happen? How do you gauge what is an appropriate percentage of weeds? That is my question, so we know what our standard throughout the community is.
While Laura's on her way up.
Sorry, I just wanted
No, I will fully answer that question. While
Figure that
Laura's
part
on her
out.
way up, let me just put into perspective. So Todd, with his out-of-scope guesstimation for this year, based on what we're projecting to end, was about $20,000 off. And he's $20,000 less than what we budgeted. So he's looking for ways to save wherever he can. I think 20,000 is pretty good variance there for trying to guess what is going to die out of scope throughout the year. So again, when it comes to budgeting, we are always going to budget a little bit on the higher side just to make sure we're not under budgeting on that.
So 100% versus 80%, the contract price is gonna be the same.
Right.
So
that should be at 100%, don't worry about it.
All right, so
How do you look? I think Kevin's question's fair.
So when we're looking at a property, I'm gonna assume that when we were out there probably more weeds, and they had been done in the process, because we have never cited for one weed.
I thought it was the weirdest thing.
We don't have the time or, manpower.
It was just a weird.
I don't know. I made Vaughn and Vanessa both come out and look at my screen. It was like,
And that's what I was looking
you ever see my screen? I want a picture of the Jackson screen.
We're not out there, but if we look at a single bed and that bed is, there are multiple weeds in one bed, then we're gonna go after it. So I'd
Yeah,
say
it
we're
was just a
probably in a
weird-
25% range
Do you have
minimum.
a company that comes in to do it?
No, I do it myself. That's why I'm like, I know damn well what my weeds are. Fire me. Okay.
what happens, Todd, between
Just stay up there, Laura.
Founder's Park is
Don't make that long.
Founder's Park's beautiful. I mean, it's really pretty. I mean, but then you go to Heritage, and it looks
The grass on the
Depending upon the area you're
in the
looking at.
back.
Because I think it's, when we generalize, which I know I'm guilty of doing too, Heritage Park, well, actually, not all of Heritage Park.
I'm talking about the back. I'm talking about the
Yeah,
back.
'cause
Talking about the triangle-shaped Indian hawthorn with the vine on top of it.
I'm talking about where the kids kick the ball in the
Yeah,
back.
that's that.
What happened back there? Why does it look
Well,
so
the
bad?
turf itself, there's goosegrass in it. It's a weed.
Yeah, it's that big clumpy
Yeah, and it doesn't
stuff.
mow well with the type of mower that they have. It doesn't mow well with anything. So they're in the process of getting rid of that
Oh.
weed. It's real invasive.
It is.
You notice there's hardly any other weeds out there except for that one,
Yeah.
and it's hard to control. So,
We
yes,
don't
last.
want to mow over it, right? Because then it
Oh,
just
they-
spreads it all over
It
the
spreads
place.
it everywhere.
So, yes, I was
Oh.
there last week and walked it and got all over them, but there is some other weeds in the hedge that, and in fact, I followed up with an email this morning when you mentioned that. So overall, I would say the condition of the landscape, I would be, as hard as I am on them, I'd say we're about 90% of where I would like to be, which if you put it in perspective to Davie, they were about 50%. So we've come a long way. There's always going to be some areas that need work, but that's why we have such a strong scope and all the abilities to force their hand and make sure they get that work done. And we're right in the middle of summer, so it's a little tough.
I'll add that we just talked right before this part during the break, just for a minute, because I was curious his true opinion, and that's exactly what he said. I think what we did was, last year, we created a chart, so when we came to this conversation at this time, we could turn around and reflect back on a metric and see how it was overall. And honestly, it's looked pretty normal, as expected over the last year. I would say, and I think we agreed on this, is every landscaper is going to probably give us the same troubles. And even if we were to turn around and say, you know what, let's bring the landscaping team in-house and save money, we're still going to have the same level of frustrations.
And different challenges, because then we have staffing
Yes.
issues.
But I think that
Yes, exactly.
we're probably, as long as the numbers are working, I think you're never going to get a perfect. We wish it could be. We do, and we set our standards high. But overall, I think landscaping is
In conjunction,
growing
I've got
challenge.
a quick question. A couple of residents, and I mean literally a couple, it's not been overwhelming, but have addressed concerns about the smaller CROA parks. The ones that are a little more recessed, not maybe.
Like Muse
Yeah,
and-
like the smaller Muse, perhaps they're not getting the attention, and that may be the 10% you're talking about, because they're not in the main, it's more of a destination, but it's still properties right outside of somebody's home.
Right.
And is that been something that you've noticed when you've driven around, that it's something that's been addressed, or is it something that you feel on the scope of your goals with the landscaping company, that's probably not been on your highlights?
It fluctuates. It depends on, like, East Village has a few parks over the past few weeks that have gotten a few more weeds in them. But if you're talking about a park half the size of this room and you have 10 weeds, that seems like a lot compared to Founder's Park that has 10 weeds. So it's all in relative. But
Todd, I got a question about, what's going to be the impact of Yellowstone bowing out of Spring Lake? What's going to be the impact on the contract price for next year with them? And then what would we have to make up money-wise for another company to take Spring Lake?
The service area is gonna have to make it up. It's all that service.
Well, I mean, the service, okay, the service area,
Because they're
right.
not, because they're still going to be here.
Correct.
They just,
Contract.
oh, yeah, it was, okay.
They contract with,
That's a separate contract.
It is.
Yes.
okay,
And the price should not be reflective. They may do it internally,
so,
but it should not be
but
reflective.
that's not part of our 800.
it is not.
Okay.
Service area, right?
Well, the Muse are CROA
The
Muse.
Muse are CROA.
And the pool is a CROA pool.
But they're not leaving all the Muse too, though, right? That's part of their.
Not according to their letter.
They're
They
going
were
to keep building the
single-family
views?
and townhomes only.
Right.
They did not mention parks or the pool.
Yeah, that's part of their overall
Whether
contract.
they change their mind, that's a whole different story.
So, at the 100% standard that we have in the contract today, you feel the 820 is a budgeted amount where you've already done a lot of shaving because of the addition of the athletic field? Fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, so then, going to the board, roundup. We're still using it.
In our beds.
In our beds.
We don't put Roundup in our grass.
Because if we did, our grass would all be dead.
Die.
It works.
Roundup is not in our grass, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, okay.
There's people that are walking their animals in the beds that are, if anything, that's where it would have to have come from.
It's probably
Right.
coming from their food that they're feeding their dogs, because the chemicals are actually in food, it's in everything,
Oh.
Roundup has permeated everything.
It's blanket
It is-
sprayed over.
It's blanket sprayed all over everything. So it's important we recognize that even if we are spraying Roundup in our beds, it's not all the time. It is specific to the weeds. It is not blanketed all over. They don't just blatantly spray it in all of the beds.
Right.
Is that accurate?
That
or
is
not?
accurate, because it's
Okay.
a contact spray, so non-selected, meaning you spray it on the dirt, you're just wasting your chemicals. So if they're wise, they're not doing that. They'll only spray it on the foliage in the landscape bed.
Is management aware of any homeowner associations in the country that have been directly sued for the use of Roundup?
Not that I'm aware of. I put it out there on our forums, and there was some communities that are having the conversation, but I'm not aware of any active lawsuits.
I did specifically look that up too, and there are none. They are right now,
Careful, because
Okay.
we're not lawyers.
no, I'm just, I
No,
looked, I just.
I'm just saying,
I'm not, you're right, I'm not a
right.
lawyer.
That's why I'm asking the questions here.
Got it.
Okay. So, there are, to your knowledge, there are no lawsuits against HOAs right now. And we have asked our attorney for an opinion as to our liability with respect to that. And we received back in privileged conversation.
April of 19.
Right. And based on that privileged conversation, does management have a recommendation for us?
Believe it's the same as what we've been utilizing up to this point. Is to
That's the
continue.
right answer.
Right.
That's
And that gets communicated clearly to the contractor who's actually
I assume.
doing what management and the board's intent is.
Correct.
And reminded periodically, reminding the contractor periodically,
Constantly.
constant, right answer.
I don't think there's anything else to say.
But I think the real exposure the contractor has is the contractor's employees.
Correct, that's who.
I mean, that's,
That's
you know,
that's
the guy who decides he doesn't need to wear a mask, and if he's thirsty, he takes a drink, has got a serious problem. But I mean, you know, some of the suits that have happened now are people who didn't wear a mask, and, you know, my father was a farmer and died from hardening of the lungs because he sprayed
So using the product
stuff his entire life. I
not
mean-
designed or instructed.
Right,
That's where the problem comes.
with the landscape industry, what we're seeing is it's gonna self-cure because insurance companies are not insuring, certain, what you call your fancy insurance terms, but binders or whatever. And certain chemical companies are not selling it anymore as a supplier to some of the big landscape companies. They don't even have commercial access to that product anymore, so.
So we'll continue to work with our landscapers, and they'll continue to inform you as that process develops.
I do agree it'll self-cure because of the insurance issues that it's presenting on the people who actually manufacture the product and distribute it. But, okay.
Brian, do you mind if I request a real quick 5-minute break? And then, is there any way we can rearrange? I'm not sure if Debbie was planning on being here all day, but can we do the lifestyle conversation next? I know she's been very patient up to this point.
I'm doing, decorating.
All right, it is 2:35. Let's come back together at 2:40, and we'll go first with Debbie.
Which one she doing?
I don't know. Lifestyles, I guess.
So lifestyle programs.
Are we hot mic?
Probably.
Yes.
I was like, everything else fine. That.
so.
I have Advil.
I think I got, you name it, I got it.
I got it all right here.
All right. Since, let's do,
Lifestyles, right? Is that what you said?
yeah, net programs events. Went from a budget of 170 to a budget of 180. I would abuse the current treasurer, because last year's treasurer told you guys to give us an all-in budget and then stay with it. So what was going on here? Oh, come on up, come on up. Bring anybody in with you who wants to be part of the conversation.
Do you need to add another et cetera?
The answer is I did.
Which page is this line item?
I don't know that.
I don't know if there is a page. On page 2 of 10, you can look under net programs events, and it went from 170 to 181.
But you also have to look at your.
Projection this year is
revenue.
180, 198, so just walk us through the big picture. What's going on there? Or do you want to do it right now? Okay, at 3 o'clock, we're going to swap out the memory card, just so everybody knows, so we can plan.
One of the reasons for the increase this year, I mean, we've done it with several of our events anyway, but every event, everything we do every next year, from whether it's a movie night, concert, whatever, we are hiring a sheriff detail to have a presence at everything that we do. That is an increase of $9,340.
So, just to be specific here, last year we had 169,205, or let's just say 169 for the budget. That did not include the sheriff deputies.
It includes some, but not all. That made the bulk of the increase, that probably accounted for half of the increase this year to make sure that we had coverage and everything. We typically did not have coverage at movie nights, concerts, like the smaller concerts on the Great Lawn, that sort of thing. It just, unfortunately, in light of everything that happens in the world now, we just felt more comfortable that we'd have a presence there.
So for the year, that expense is how much?
$9,340.
Okay. Of which some of that, let's just say 6 is in here. I'm just making a number up. I'd take that to 175. Okay, go ahead.
Some of the increases, the Aloha Summer event was an increase. The event has been successful the last few years. We decided next year to expand it a little bit. In addition to what we do over at the Lakeside Pool, we're going to try to incorporate more of the residents, a wider demographic, and we're going to be doing a luau and live show on the Great Lawn that same evening. So that was an increase of about $1,000. Incorporating, like I said, live music, dancers, some food and beverage options.
Okay.
Holiday Fest.
So are the events all the same, year versus year?
Everything is the same. There is one proposed event this year that we're still structuring as a family event. That kind of takes the place of the mother's son, which we scrapped the one year after a lack of turnout. But that has a budget item of about $6,900.
And what's that item?
That's the family event. But right now, it doesn't have a structure to it. We've been throwing around some ideas. We don't have a time frame, whether we would do it spring or fall, or exactly what it would entail.
So if we take last year's budget of 169 and this year's budget of 180, we throw in the sheriff's deputy, the Aloha expansion of $1,000, and the family event of $7, we really have got the difference in the budgets.
But I don't think we get the full picture though, because we have to include the recreation events income from the income line. So if you look at the difference between the expenses and the income, it's really a $6,000 difference from last year to this year.
Because it went from 37 to 42.
Correct,
Okay.
it was an additional 5.
And you guys, is this projected 55 this year? Is that what I'm seeing? 55.8 for your income and events?
Yes. Well, we.
Isn't it 42,054?
Wait, hold on.
No, you're talking about what you're projecting for 2020.
Which
Kevin's
is
asking,
impressive.
what are we projecting for 2019? And it's showing, we budgeted 37.6 and we're projecting 55.816.
You made money this year. Thank you.
Well, I know we took flat budgets. A lot of times when you budget for revenue, they're just spread out across months. So we'd have to look at that to make sure that we weren't we didn't already receive the revenue in February or March, and on the budget, it had it spread out. Because for the projection, we only had the numbers up to July. So from August through December, it
Right,
just
but
spreads it across.
if anything.
So it could be off a little bit.
Your big income numbers are actually towards the end of the year for events, because your tables didn't go on sale until August.
Yeah,
So
and
your
the
holiday
coaching
events,
yard
your numbers are
sales.
definitely hitting your projection, if not higher.
Right.
Which is awesome.
We'd love to get to 55.8, but I don't know that
I
it's
got
gonna be
faith,
that.
I see it. And it's the only committee that's really, they asked for additional funding last year, and not only did they make it work, but they made it work. I mean, you guys,
Awesome job.
awesome
Feedback
job.
on it is- Feedback has been phenomenal from the community.
So on that point, this last year's budget was about 169, or this current year's budget, 169. A year before, it was about 140?
About 139.
Yeah, so, okay, so we increased it a lot over the last year, and you did a lot with that.
And they've returned a lot, so their net is
Yeah.
probably less now what special events cost us than it was several years ago, even though we're funding it higher on the front end.
But it's one of those, if you will, level of service that we have grown, and I think the community appreciates. Is that, and that's also looking at the
key
committee.
is to make sure that we include everybody in the community, so we try to do things for children, we try to do things for the older adults, and target some of the concerts and give them to everybody. So, that's what we're trying to do.
In this, go ahead.
No, and from the committee, if I may put you on the spot, from the committee perspective, are you happy with this? Or wrong thing to say, sorry, but is this something you would?
Well, PJ is in here with plans right now. So-
Is this okay with you, or is this something you would like to see more?
No, this is good, because I think what you're gonna see is that we are going to start to make money to come right back in.
Wow.
I think we're trying to do more with, we increased the sale this year of the concert that we're having at Christmas. I think between the committee, all of us on the committee, we all are striving for, we want more.
Can we put you down for about 200,000?
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole key, when we were talking about the sports,
Nice try.
the complex over there and everything. I can see in my head, and I know in Dory's and a few others too, that we can do all kinds of fundraising. That's not a big problem.
What do you, I'm not, expand on that a little. What do you mean?
Well, if we do something over at, I can see us doing something over at the complex, and Chandler's probably going, shh. But I can see us doing something over there, we get a band, we get something over there, but we do charge admission. And there's no
Yeah.
reason,
Yeah.
we have other people in town that do the concerts at the Presbyterian Church, et cetera, or you've got Lifelong that charges for everything people
Yeah.
pay for.
Yeah.
I don't understand why the community can't pay for it. We don't have to have everything free.
It's a nice blend.
Yes, absolutely.
If we wanted to, this is a question I don't know the answer. If we wanted to have a concert over there and use the pavilion building and sell wine and beer, could we do that?
At the athletic complex?
I think you just get a temporary license for it, I think, is what,
We
yeah.
usually just have.
Because you talked about a fundraiser, but I mean, if we sold tickets and allowed people to buy wine and beer, I mean, you could get 300 people out for a nice
If
concert.
we were to sell wine and beer and make it a concession, we're gonna need a license. That's why we utilize a
But you said
vendor
you
to
just
do
was
it, and
like-
then they usually just give us a cut or give us a fee to utilize and sell it. But we really, since we started selling alcohol at events over the last few years, we haven't had really any drunken disorderly or anybody get out of control. It's been.
It's a glass of wine.
Well, yeah, right.
Exactly.
Well, there was the semi-annual meeting. Bond got completed.
I remember.
Sounds about right.
That's the gala.
Okay, for purposes of this budget, we have the 4th of July parade in there, and morning activities.
In the
But
VIP
we've done
tower.
nothing with any
And the
evening
what?
type events. And if you want to save that for a CCS conversation,
Yeah.
Yeah.
fine, we can do that, but at the end of the day,
He just
And
made
the
a comment.
expenses allocated to the VIP firework viewing at Lakeside.
Pardon?
Park. the expenses that go towards VIP firework viewing at Lakeside Park, that's in the CROA budget also.
Is that in this? Is that here?
Correct, yes.
That's in the 180?
Yes, that's reflected in the July 4th line item.
However, the morning
Well, that's a separate
parade.
line item.
Is CROA.
You won't see it on your overall budget. We have
interested in
complete
pushing
detailed
that to
budgets of
CCS?
each
I
one of
don't
the.
understand, what was the VIP viewing?
It's the Lakeside Park on the Great Lawn. It's
Oh.
residents.
residents
Oh,
only.
okay, yeah, okay, so,
There's some expenses involved. with
okay, gotcha,
staffing.
so it's not a lot, it's not moving the budget.
It's residents only though, right, for the VIP?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it can't be a CCS cost?
No.
Okay.
Are there expenses in this budget that could be CCS expenses? Are there budget expenses here that should be on CCS?
The one question that just came up last time, and Kevin just mentioned it again, was there was conversation about perhaps moving the parade itself to being a CCS. And then you would not have, we talked about, there was no political, nothing political, there was several
Yeah.
different things that you couldn't, if we moved it from a CROA to a CCS expense, we'd have to change that.
But we're not politically endorsing, we're just allowing somebody to march.
I said, if we switch it to a CCS, you can't.
You could almost move all your food truck Fridays to CCS.
Well, there's an income there, so we don't want to do that. No.
What's that?
That's an income, because we can do farmer's market too, but there's an income for the farmer's market. We want to keep
No, you're
those
right.
income
Yeah,
items,
it makes sense.
but an expense is that parade entirely through and through.
There's
Posh
no
Pooch,
income
I think
from
at
the
one point
parade,
was a
right?
CCS.
It's
It still is. Now, is that income is there an income
CCS.
generation?
The income from Posh Boost goes back to CCS.
See, I'd rather turn around and take Posh Pooch and put it into CROA.
Well, we
And take-
we
The
can no
grants
longer
would be
apply
on
for
the-
grants.
Yeah, you get grants.
No, I understand that, but we could turn around and put that in and take something like the parade and put that into
But that-
CCS.
We just were awarded $7,500 grant for next year. We wouldn't be able to use that or to apply for them if it's a CROA. fund.
Right, but I think when we broke down what the expenses are versus, we would have to go back to that meeting, because we did have a conversation about it. And the numbers, the way it worked out, it didn't make sense to do a grant. It washed out.
Well, if you
We'll
want
go
to
back to
advertise,
it.
that's where our advertising money comes from.
Are you talking about Posh Pooch?
Yeah, they just switched the conversation to Posh Pooch.
I was checking to see what is CCS right now, is what I was saying.
Essentially, it'll be Posh Pooch, unless we do the
That would
fourth.
be the only thing.
But we need to start thinking about CCS, or otherwise, if I was CROA, I would tell us to go to hell, why am I giving you money?
For the
I mean,
parade.
so, the parade, and I'm just wondering if there are other things. I mean, I think we need to study this a little more, because CCS needs to be a vibrant, utilized thing, or I'd come back and I'd say, go pound sand and give me back my portion of the money.
I don't want, I think unfortunately what has happened with CCS, is it has been demonized beyond where it should have been. Having CCS is a good thing. And the fact that it has been demonized, we should not react to the back porch and to the naysayers just because there is a negative perception to something.
Well, in all honesty, the concerts we just talked about out on the athletic complex,
CCS.
why couldn't they be CCS? Because those,
Absolutely.
I'm assuming you're not talking about those being for only residents? I mean, if it's only residents, it can't be in CCS. But if we.
Usually, I don't know, she's the one that talked about it.
Oh, well, that's what I had brought up before.
I mean, that's a question, because if we allowed the general public to come, if we said we'll sell 500 tickets as an example, and if the general public bought 125 and 375 was residents, and we had 500 people, that could become a CCS activity, because now we're benefiting the general
But the
good.
income, that's the only reason why I wouldn't
don't
go
wanna
for
lose
that.
that.
I don't want to go ahead and be making all of this money for CCS only at our CROA volunteers and staffing.
We could charge rent.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Or
ways.
it could go back, or the money could actually go back to
It
fireworks.
doesn't have to be a big profit maker, we could charge rent and stuff. I mean, we could there could be an alcohol license, for example, that comes out of CCS, which is used for both public events and for private events. So there's a whole, I'm thinking, I had never thought about using the fields until I heard it earlier today, but there's a whole business model here we could evolve quite a bit more that would
Pre-sale for celebration
feed other
residents.
pieces.
Joseph is coming unglued over there because he's on the events committee.
Oh, come on up.
He's on the right track.
Have you already thought of all this? Tell us the rest of the stuff you thought about.
Just when I went to 5A celebration.
Go ahead.
These are things that we looked at with this complex. And this is the advantage of having this complex as a business model working with the town. Is that yes, whatever contract management works out with a vendor, it's not based on our pricing that we talked about in terms of field rental. We're now doing separate contracts for overall use or specific use. We built into that, you know, you're gonna need more staff here, you're gonna need to add an extra fee here. We had sections of time that were gonna have to possibly be incremental fees. So an event like that would be a specific contract under certain terms to use that facility based on how management works back and forth on that. So there are definitely opportunities to say, between this area for an outside vendor coming in, you're gonna pay us to rent this facility above and beyond a large amount of money. Then they as a vendor come in and do whatever they're gonna do.
Stay.
Kevin's point is very valid, and Joseph, I think to add on to that, if it's just a rental, there's no expenses from us at all, so you collect all the revenue and you keep it. So JR was talking about if someone comes in and says, I'll give you 40% of the cut of the door, or whatever that number looks like, then that could completely go into CROA, which is why it's a great point that Food Truck Friday shouldn't move, because it's a profit center, so you make a little bit of money. If it was an expense that wasn't quite covered completely, then he's right, CCS probably makes it, that you could open up to everybody, and then you move it over to there.
But I'm thinking, and I'm asking, I'm thinking we expand, when we talk about the meeting, when we talk about the CCS budget capabilities, this is really the expansion. The 112,000 is seed capital towards building a business model here. I mean, we talked about having the adjusted 83 in revenue, but if we can end up with rental income of another 50,000 for events, and I'm just making a number up, you know, a couple of years out, that's real money, that $25 a home in a year, that for events that we'll probably attend.
Well, I would hope you did.
If you invite me.
If I find a table and invite you, yes.
All right, I actually think that's great. I appreciate that.
But I also don't want to switch everything over to the, you know, we need to keep Lakeside, you know, and I like having events over there. We've done a great job setting up tables, et cetera, and making it an event now, just, you know, not just going down to Lakeside. I mean, we've done a great job, I think, with putting tables, decorating them a little bit to draw the interest, selling the tables.
It's more centered in town.
And people
People
bring their,
can walk
you know,
or they can ride their
love
bike.
it.
Yeah,
They
it's
love
a
it.
traditional
And I think
space.
Jara's done a great job with
Yeah.
getting the entertainment.
And some of the smaller venues can go to Lakeside rather than Fields.
Well, again, local event versus third party coming in,
Mhm.
that takes place in celebration, that brings people into the community versus a local event that is for the community specifically to make sure that we're providing those particular services.
It's a way to showcase our field, our athletic
Well,
complex too.
it's a great avenue for CCS because of the community too,
Yeah.
The same with the dog park.
drawn regionally.
All right. Anything else on this
Mr.
topic?
President?
Is everybody comfortable? Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Oh, he needs to switch his.
yeah, 5 minutes, or however long it takes. Let's go to consultant utilization next. Laura, let's talk about consultants. Consultant utilization. Oh, for all you Pittsburgh Steelers fans, Big Ben is out for the year.
Really?
Yeah.
Elbow surgery.
Wow.
I'm guessing you're at Pittsburgh, Stuart.
Born and raised.
Oh, Brian.
That's a character flaw.
A Browns fan.
Football is dead to me.
Oh, it's only, oh, never mind.
Yes.
Steelers fan, or Steelers big.
What about the
State fan.
historical stuff, Susan?
Pardon me?
When are they gonna put the history in?
Consultant utilization.
Reports.
Oh, I'll ask you.
I wanna know that. I mean, if they don't do that, then it was a waste of money. But that's all right. I knew it was when it was suggested.
Okay. So for consultants, we're looking at.
Wait, are we live? Okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
good.
sorry, go ahead.
Okay, we're looking at landscape architect and the town architect. So Albert, who is our landscape architect, is $150 per hour, billed in 15-minute intervals.
I'm sorry, so Albert is?
$150 per hour, billed in 15-minute intervals.
Okay.
And then Jeffrey, who is the town architect, is $185 per hour with a 3-hour minimum per week, which is a discounted rate, or $200 per hour.
So what, and they're both in the budget for how much?
So total for the year, what we were looking at
By
was-
individual?
Yes, so total for the year, we're looking, Albert runs about $11,000, and Jeffrey runs about $26,400 for the year.
And it's just, what does Albert really do for the 11,000?
So every single landscape application we get for ARC, Albert reviews.
What's his qualifications? What is his title?
He is a practicing landscape architect.
He's a landscape architect.
Correct.
Okay.
He has reviewed and written all of our landscape guidelines. He also goes on, like currently we are in, dealing with some landscape issues with condos. Every time we go out for a walk, Albert's right there with me. I mean, he can look at a plant and say, this isn't permitted in celebration, this is, you have too many here, these aren't gonna work, any here, these are all gonna die off. We just don't have the knowledge without him. There is no two ways about it.
He used to also be on the ARC committee years ago.
Right.
He still covers, I think, every now and then if
Well, no.
necessary.
I was just making a comment because when I came here 8 years ago, he was on the ARC committee, he's one of the members. So the ARC committee referred to him on all landscaping items. He's on it for a couple years.
He was a paid consultant then, too?
No, he was just a member of the committee. You didn't have to live in Celebration, you know.
He was a volunteer on the
Yes.
committee, okay.
So how did he go from being a volunteer to being paid?
Well, he left the committee, and the ARC committee after that said, I think Jeffrey was even on at the time, we don't have the qualifications to review landscape. And so we need someone to give us that kind of information, because they were architectural consultants, they weren't specified in landscape. So they asked, and they recommended Albert, because he'd been on the committee, and he's done a lot of work in Celebration. And so that's when he was brought on.
Does he attend every meeting?
No.
No.
He does not.
No,
He's just contact and say, hey, could you look this over, type of thing?
Correct.
So what about conflict of interest when he's working on projects, then who reviews them?
Actually, if he submits an application, we review them, or we ask Todd to review them, which is not common, thank goodness,
Because Todd's an expert.
I mean,
Thank
Todd's
goodness.
got his own job, so I mean, but, you know, we're going off of what Albert provided us as guidelines, even when we review his work, so.
Well, let me just add on to that question too. I think that we have to ask ourselves the question, is it a added value to have a contracted licensed landscape architect? forget about the name of who that is, just is that a value at all? And then second, is it of value to have a licensed landscape architect that has a certain subject matter expertise with our design guidelines and our pattern book? I think anybody that you hire has an opportunity for a conflict of interest, though, if they're going to do any work with Celebration. So I think that they're almost two separate questions. The first one is it important to have one? And if it is, how do you avoid that conflict of interest? And it sounds like contractually you can avoid that.
Didn't we already write into the contracts that they couldn't, neither Jeffrey or Albert could review projects that they had either worked on or even bid on and lost, because we did run into a potential conflict a year or so ago. And I think it's worked out okay. And if you had to go out and hire a landscape architect to review a project, if it was really complicated, you could do that, right? I mean, there certainly are other people that are landscape architects.
Yeah, and if Albert was to win the lottery and decide that he's never coming back, we would still recommend to try and find someone with that subject matter level of expertise.
So on a day-to-day basis, it makes sense to have the consultant. I think the question for me, particularly after seeing the recent email from Jeffrey, I'm concerned about overreaching, and I'm concerned about the town architect reaching in and speaking for CROA on items like this Celebration Avenue bike lane issue.
Just to clarify, I don't believe he came representing it as CROA. He did not represent himself as representing CROA.
Well, and I think the way he
And
wrote
he
this
said
is a little
specifically
bit misleading.
CCDD.
Yeah, it's a little bit misleading the way he wrote this. He's saying other indirect services that he's actively done as a community member, not on behalf of CROA.
Correct.
I mean, I want to be really 100% clear. He's not speaking for us on this.
I told him when this initially started a few years ago that if he was going to be that representative, it was not part of his paid portion from CROA. It would be as the town architect doing it on his own.
So we're not paying any hourly fees for him for consulting with the county or talking about the road project or the bike parking or bike lanes or any of that, right? And we get a detailed billing that says, here's what I did for those 3 hours a week, correct?
Yes, when we get a bill, he will say what days, and we as the department can usually pinpoint, oh, this was an ARC committee meeting, this was this project we asked him to go look at, things like that.
Okay. But just to be explicit, you have not seen or approved a bill from him that would indicate that he has met with the county or worked with the county or done anything with respect to roadways, because that is not our, jurisdiction.
Correct, we have never received any bills or anything along those lines.
And I don't approve his bills, but I can tell you I had a conversation with him a couple of years ago that if you're going to be a part of this, it's not as a CROA representative, it's on your own time.
Well, I think we have some advantages and disadvantages of working very closely in this capacity with somebody that lives here in the community. And that has the history, if we're specifically talking about Jeffrey, that he does have in Celebration. However, on the other side, and this is nothing against anybody that does work here in Town Hall, we don't have these areas of expertise. And perhaps if we went back 15, 20 years ago, we would have started this place off and said, all right, we have an in-house landscape architect that also is the person that goes ahead and does this, that, the other. And they're, Todd, he's all of that. We have an AOC person that is not just ARC approvals, but they have an experience in urban planning. Maybe that's somewhere that we need to look, in 10 years from now, but that's not where we are. So it's a double-edged sword to go ahead and work with somebody with so much expertise that also lives in the community, because naturally they're going to make a comment that they feel personally, and they're entitled to do so. But they're known as.
But it's even in our charter. We prefer it to be residents. We want them to be residents of the Celebration.
How much of the budget, I'm sorry, how much of the budget gets expended under those two people?
6,000.
It's 11,000 for Albert and.
I know.
Where is it here?
Do they get paid the total up front, or is this
No,
an hourly up to that amount?
No, it would be their total hours times their bill rate. This is just what's budgeted.
That's what I'm asking. I mean, how much of the budget do we expend actually out of the 26.4 or the 11?
I mean, that was our budget based off of what we've seen so far this year. So this is an average budget of what we're.
Oh, it's just
Much
a
over
number.
for
That's their real expectation
Correct.
and
Your
wants to be
expectation
spent.
is that we.
That's their
Correct,
expectation.
Exactly. I
Which
mean,
is-
okay.
it could always, we wind up in
Oh, I
a
see.
lawsuit and need, an architect.
That's
and it
just
could
generally what
skyrocket.
we're figuring on expending on that individual.
Correct, yes.
Okay, got it.
Clearly, if we stay with this relationship, we'll accept Jeffrey's offer in his email.
I'm adding additional.
Can I just make a quick
Go
statement
ahead.
based upon ARC, as the ARC liaison? Every meeting I've been to, Jeffrey has been there. He has provided valuable insight. He has been a sounding board, even of rational sounding board, where sometimes the committee was going over and he's like, well, you gotta think of this, and it's okay if all of a sudden we wanna paint something different, a different color. We need to be, we need to be forward-thinking and not so restrictive, but he also will bend well, wait a minute here. Is this really the look we want? So he brings in a good balance, and more importantly, he brings in a history of, well, the reason why we didn't accept it, this particular situation is because of X, Y, or Z. The circumstances that they're describing in this situation is not X, Y, or Z, it's A, B, C. So he can actually bring that intellectual knowledge that no one, especially as a volunteer committee member, would be ever expected to bring in as an expertise.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
the fact that Jeffrey's a founder and he's a keeper of the flame gives us something that is valuable. I like all of that. I like what he brings to the table. I think that we could continue to define the role and what we want these consultants to do. I am personally concerned that there is a crossover between their roles as consultants and their roles as residents or their roles as business people. And I think our contracts need to continue to be clear about what it is that they're being paid to do. Other than that, I'm fine with them.
I think we should continue as is and perhaps focus more attention on what happens when Jeffrey decides to retire.
That's a bigger concern for me.
He has the
That's where I
pattern
think our
book
focus needs
memorized.
to be.
Who memorizes a pattern book?
And we get detailed billing.
You don't write it, it's easy.
Okay, David?
No, I think each of them bring that expertise. The thing I wonder about is, and again, this is no reflection on Jeffrey, 3 hours minimum per week. So if the week goes by and nothing goes on, he gets a minimum.
Well, it's or $200 per hour. So,
Whichever is greater or whichever is lesser.
I would have to go back and look.
And what happens if he's on vacation or on a business trip?
From conversations I had with Tony before you stepped in, was that and I don't know if you have the same relationship now, but she would pick up the phone and go ahead and just say, Jeffrey, I have a quick question, I have this, that, the other. So I definitely would say that we're probably getting our money's worth overall, but I'm happy to go ahead and dig into it and double check.
I mean, I will tell you, if we even get one complaint about something structural, somebody's building something structural, they don't think it's being done, we will call Jeffrey or email him saying, hey, when can you go take a look at this? Can you tell us, is it 100% where it's supposed to be? Can you, I mean, we're not architects. That's, the ARC committee's not architects.
I think that quick experience, I mean, you talked about Albert, walking, that plant would not be, that sort of knowledge, you hire another landscape architect, that's not going to be the case. And I think the same's with Jeffrey. I just look at fixed costs and are there ways of looking at maximizing his expertise and being more proactive? He had in his email the suggestion, maybe I can help consult with residents who are considering some application coming forward or some language like that.
Town hall, 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because people are always contemplating doing things. Actually, people come to the committee meetings oftentimes and say, hey, I'm looking at doing this, how can I make it happen?
I'm just thinking of how can we have that as a win-win? A win for the community, win for residents, win for our budget, win for him. Just a matter of relooking at what that package might look like.
I think
But
that's
that knowledge from both of them, I think is invaluable.
Okay, so we can roll forward. You're on board, you're on board, you're on board. Either one of you two?
I'm good.
I do have a quick question related to this topic. Do we charge any kind of an admin fee when an application does come through?
No,
Is
but
that
it-
something
you
that
have the
maybe we should
ability
look
to.
into in the future? I'm not saying to cover the cost of the expense to do it, but if we do it for fines, as an example, for the labor and admin time that was spent on something, do we go ahead and say, hey, we're happy to go ahead and see your application for A, B, C? If it's quick, open, close, hey, maybe it's $20, I don't know. If it's an extension, it might be a flat $100, you know, for review. And it takes that time, because there is time. And for a house that's never done an extension or never does any work on it, again, it's one village, we all work together, but that might be more of a, if we're thinking about that pay-to-play kind of a conversation, perhaps those types of moments of applications for review should be looked at. That's what a
guess
municipality would be like.
I guess my only concern with going down that path is we require it as a homeowner association that you follow our rules. And we're already having a hard time getting people to fill out their forms for their Ring doorbell.
That's another conversation.
Exactly, so I guess, yes, so I guess I hear what you're
Thinking
saying.
more extension, more structural, more.
Right, but I guess I don't want to get into, I don't want to get too much into the weeds of, to be totally honest with you, I'd rather please fill out your paperwork. I don't care how you do it, just fill it out. Just do it. And I don't know that I don't know that we want to add town hall's responsibility with, oh, by the way, you're not collecting before you actually look at the review. That's my only concern.
Technical question is, are these two dollar amounts, this $37,000, is this under legal and professional?
It is, correct, and we have it split out as a
Okay,
separate
okay,
GL line
okay.
in the budget.
Thank you.
Well, so, since we're talking about legal and professional, can I hijack the conversation for a minute? I've already mentioned earlier today, I am deeply concerned about our legal fees on a couple of different areas. We have ongoing litigation fees in at least 3 cases. And then we have just the normal legal fees that come across as we ask for opinion letters and so on. Where is the litigation fee showing up, Steve, on this budget?
We have, in budget line 6505, we have some subcategories. 650001 is, and it
What's
won't
the
be
title? We don't have
reflective.
numbers.
We don't have that.
I know, and just reading it to you, it won't be reflective on your overall budget because it all feeds up into that.
Can you show me what, is it the $103,000?
I'm sorry, yeah, we don't have numbers.
Legal and
to it.
professional, 103,656, it'd have to be in there.
Yeah.
That would be correct under, if it's under.
And it's also the wrap-up
There,
of the
it's
charter review
103,656.
project.
Yep.
So that's all legal fees, including litigation?
Correct.
As well as
So
landscape
we
and
have
architect.
for your board initiatives, $20,000 in there, which would be part of the wrap-up of the charter, and then any additional, if you have any condo litigation that you have, that may be part of that. We do have collections that are a very small amount, $75 a month, and we have covenants, in case we need legal for covenants, $25,000 for that. And then we have our general legal, which includes your prime, Larson Prime, at another $20,000.
Have we received any bill at all for any of the specific litigation in which I'm sure Jackson is referring to,
In the service areas?
for the service area? We
Yeah.
have received
We
the
have.
bills.
I told Jackson
I thought
today
you
that I
emailed.
would send all of that to you. I was sending it January, February, March, April, I think.
Okay.
I think, Susan, we're going to need to see this on a much more regular basis. We're going into executive session on, the 25th to
Right.
talk about some of this litigation, and we certainly are going to want to know. But I am personally doubtful that this number is anywhere near high enough for the next 12 months. We are not paying, these are not all contingency cases that we've got. So there's going to be an outflow for legal expenses. It sounds like some of the condo litigation is going well, some is not going well, some that we haven't as a board, this board has not been involved with some previous condo litigation that now apparently has come back into life and is costing us for depositions and interrogatories and other work. You're giving me the side eye because you don't know any more about it than we did a month ago or a week ago.
Okay, I gotta say, I'll tell you.
I'm trying to be deliberately.
I know you're being polite and trying to complain,
But
but.
this is even before me. This started before, while I was on.
So my point here is not, I'm not trying to cast aspersions, I'm simply saying, in trying to figure out this line item, I'm concerned that that number could be dramatically higher than what we've got here, and you know, I'm not sure exactly how you guys came up with this number. I know you've got some fixed legal expenses, but we have some unknown legal expenses, and I'd like to get a better sense of, were you expansive with that? Were you conservative and thinking it wouldn't be much?
Well, without knowing the details, are we talking about CROA expenses? Are we talking about service area expenses? I mean,
Both.
And, well,
Well, I think
We have
that
service
answers,
areas,
but
we have condo.
that's the answer to my question, though. If we look at, for 2019, we budgeted 94,966, and we're projecting at about 85.5. That does not include you all fronting any legal fees for service areas. So if you want that, then that's a different conversation completely. I'm comfortable with our 103.7 number that we put in here for any type of litigation you might have with your condo associations, because one of them's almost done. I mean, quite literally, they could, if they just did one thing, you could wrap this thing up completely and be done with it. The other one, I believe, you just did a walkthrough last week and are moving rapidly towards.
Yeah, one of them is in pretty good shape.
Right.
One of them is not in good shape. I mean, I'm going to take issue here with you. If you had people doing interrogatories for 4 hours, you know, 4 staff people doing interrogatories for 4 hours last week, that isn't close to being wrapped up.
But if you look at the work that needs to be done,
Yeah.
the legal side of it is if you gave up and you stopped doing interrogatories and stopped doing the depositions, then it might not ever get done. It literally would take them just to replace some plants for them to be done with this thing.
I don't disagree with that part. My point is, there's an expense that goes with that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not convinced that that piece of litigation, absent going into executive session, I'm not convinced that that piece of litigation is wrapped up yet. I appreciate your
It's not,
optimism.
but we've been spending on it all year this year up to this point, and we're still under what we budgeted for our projection.
And then we've got the service area litigation. And the question that we've got there, I think, I don't know, you tell me, I think we've said we're gonna pay on an ongoing basis and then get reimbursed later, but that is not going to come for free. I mean, and so we've got an expense here, and that expense would not appear in the 2019s in great numbers because we're just starting up on some of that now.
okay, can we ask you and Vaughn to sit with Steve and actually itemize this in some level of detail that the rest of us then can get an email and look at and have an idea what's going on? Is that fair, board?
that's reasonable.
Because right now, we're talking in coded code. I just need, I need information.
To go back to your original.
The treasurer does too.
About legal bills each month. I think the last one, it's been several months since we've gotten that. And
I've
think-
never seen
I
one,
think
so-
one of our, so it's been 6
Okay,
months
so-
at least. I think that was a request, was each month as those bills come through, that they got shared. I know that you wanted to be the person to just have a look.
Yeah.
Maybe we could bring that back.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Okay, Vaughn, Jackson, and management, Steve, whoever's going to be, put together something, update us and figure out the process so we can monitor this going forward, because the bigger in a bread box, we need education.
And for these assignments, these break-off assignments, I'm going to start scheduling meetings this week for these, so that I can start getting some direction to update the budget.
Yeah, and since we've got the executive session coming up on the 25th, I think, it would be very helpful if we could get together before then.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get it scheduled for this week.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Can we mention one other thing about consultants? You had mentioned at some point in time that we have an ongoing issue with short-term rentals. And so Laura has done the research for that. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so,
Which is not in the budget.
correct, this would be an addition. So I was tasked with looking into companies that monitor short-term rentals in an area. I reached out to some of the top 3, heard back from 2 of them. There are differences in cost between the 2. So the one did a basic review of Celebration and found 106 short-term rentals currently. I think I know about 4. So where they're finding these other ones, I have no idea.
I would not be surprised. There's way too many out there that you can't, I mean, you see, like, even neighbors, you're like, wait a minute, suitcase, who are they? And then, yeah. And then you don't see anything for a while, and that's surprising.
So what would it cost us to have this?
So the 2 companies that I heard from, annual One of them is $2,940. And if we pay the amount in full, there's a 10% discount if we pay the yearly amount in full. The other company that I looked at, their first year rate is $4,500, and then it drops each year after that if we continue to use them. There is a big difference in what we're getting between the two for the cost. The one that's $4,500, they monitor 50+ sites. And their system is pretty extensive. They can cross-reference photos. So if a property comes off of one website and jumps to another one, it's going to trigger in their system because they're using the same photos automatically. So their system is less for management, less work for management. They have such an extensive computer system that they can narrow it down on their own as to what's in celebration, what's not. And they will run a report for me a minimum 4 times a week, but I can always log into the website more and pull a report at any point. Well, what they're looking at is when they say 4 times a week, they're looking at weekdays, weeknights, and then weekend days and weekend nights is what they
Popular check-in days.
is what they do. The other company, they do it by a radius system. So what they look at is 17, they take an address and look within 17 miles of that, run a report, and it's up to me to narrow it down.
Nope.
But the
So the 4,500 is a lot cheaper in the long run.
Yeah.
Yes. The positive on them, though, is they do offer something called secret shopping. If we can't find, if we absolutely cannot figure out what the address is, they will book it, get the address, and then cancel. And it's flat out, here's your address.
Well, but can you get the other company to do the same thing?
I would have to check with
I
them.
bet you-
It's
I
not
bet you if you
something
asked
they
them.
offered, but I can check with them.
I'd be happy if the board would allow to work with Laura on this. This is what I came from. This is what I did. I'd be happy to work with you
I
on
would
this.
be happy to let you work with it, because to me,
Absolutely.
you know, if we, because of some of the other issues we've had arise, we're spending money, but we can save a lot of money in the back end and other things.
Yeah.
Is it fair to let Laura and Kevin work on this one?
And let's do it
more
now
stats
before
you had,
Highland
Laura?
Village comes on.
I'm sorry?
You had some other
What are the stats?
statistics there.
What are the stats that you have?
About the 88, you had,
Yes, so they found 106 potential short-term rentals within Celebration. 88 were on Airbnb alone. I mean, they can break it down by website. Like I said, they monitor 50-plus websites. And if, both of them did say if there's any specific websites that they don't cover that we're aware of, we'll tell them they will cover that as well.
and the fact that they're actually advertising is a violation of our covenants, and that's $1,000 just for advertising, if I'm not mistaken.
No, $1,000 for non-submittal of lease.
What
And
about
then
just advertising?
Advertising is $100 per day to the advertising.
Okay, $100 per day.
It's an
then.
You all have considered it an
That's an
egregious.
egregious, yeah.
And as long as that doesn't change, we would
So
consider.
that gives us a lot of ammunition right
Correct.
off the bat.
And the one company, the one that is more expensive, on their report, they will give me a full breakdown of, here's the listing, here's a copy of when it was active, when it was taken down. And then they also said they will keep it in their system for, I would have to go back a period of like a year or something. If it becomes active 3 months from now, it's gonna trigger in their system again, and I'm gonna get another
All right.
report.
Kevin is in charge of this with Laura.
We'll get together this
Everybody
week or
agree?
next week.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I don't know if this is like beyond reach or whatever. Any chance we can get that working for like our next board meeting?
I
We
mean,
can try. I think there's one right by,
There is.
You guys take care of this afterwards. I'm gonna move forward.
Expensive
There is.
within my threshold, we could go out and purchase tomorrow if we
it
wanted
would be
to.
a matter of
Um,
just the
one
attorney,
year
and then-
the
contract.
attorney.
Right, you just have to get you guys to agree to that, you'd have to approve the contract then. if
The
it's-
attorney has
yeah,
to
this-
read over it.
I just want to review like the guarantees and
Okay, it's a sign.
And we wanna-
I mean, it has value, and we can get
And it's-
revenues to offset the expense.
That's a quick win as far
let's
as
get
I'm
on the,
concerned.
We'd have to go.
we can
Okay.
put that on the agenda next week.
Let's go to the next
Thank you,
item.
Ron, for going to Asheville.
Okay.
Thank you, Ron.
Town hall closure on Sundays. Let's talk about it.
Oh, okay. I opened up the wrong thing, give me just a second. thought you wanted to talk about the committee budgets, are we skipping that?
We'll go there next.
Okay.
What are we talking about now?
Town hall closure on Sundays.
Okay. I will start with just some simple data on average of, thank you. It looks like we have approximately 6 open houses on average on Sundays, which we have an app now, and just for anybody that doesn't know, for open houses, instead of putting up the big signs and balloons and everything, you can pay a fee to do an open house advertisement here, and we'll have flyers that we put out. We could easily put those flyers in a box on the outside of the door. And on our app, you can click and go online to where those open houses are listed. So they're on our website, there's a link from our app that will get you to where they are, or you can come grab a flyer from the box if we were to eliminate Sunday operation hours here. ID cards, we average about 2 on Sundays, about 1 decal on Sundays. We've had 0 dog park activations on Sundays, and for payments, no payments on Sundays. We average about 3 phone calls on Sundays, and then no ARC covenants, no store business on Sundays, and nothing else really. I mean, it's really a slow, dead day on Sundays.
And how much would we save?
Do you have that one also?
Yes, for utilities, we're looking at the utilities and water, it's $126 a day on average that we pay for electric and water.
And you would save that if you weren't open?
We would not have anybody using the water, and we would not have the air conditioning on here in the building.
Now, we would still be able to, if we had bookings.
Well, yeah, what about, are we paying people on an hourly basis?
It would just be allocated within the week and probably used to help offset some of those admin needs that we have within the office. So they're all full-time staff, so we wouldn't be eliminating any FTEs.
So what are we actually saving?
You'd be able to increase your staffing in the week when we're busier.
Right, it just.
Staffing's not changing though, and if Sundays are slow, that work can still be getting done on Sundays.
Just, there's none of the department heads here to work with them on it. I mean, there could be some slight admin work, but the majority of that's taking place during Monday through Friday. Now, there is opportunities for rentals still. We would just charge the staffing fee for the rentals like we would any other time that you're using the building during off hours.
So somebody can still come in, so the building availability for rentals and things like that would not go away?
No, it would still have that availability.
Okay.
It's all fee-based.
It's just people just coming in to do routine business would not be available.
But they would have to have a staff person unlock the door to let them in,
But that
and
would
then
be
stay
charged
here
back to the
until they
event.
live, right?
That would be charged back to the event, though.
They do pay for that? They would pay for
They
that
do
person?
pay for that.
Okay.
And I was gonna say, Brian, Todd just said we'd really have like 75% of the cost, so it'd be $100 a day we would save. And we have 45 Sundays that we're open out of 50.
$4,500.
Yeah, I think it goes back to level of service. If the one day that somebody, at first I was all for, hey, cut it on Sundays, let everybody have Sunday off, that's great. I love that mentality. But the reality is for $4,000 a year.
It's not saving much money. Is there any,
But I still.
is there any value in just not having it open because it gives people a break? I'm just asking a question. So I'm agreeing $4,000.
Yeah, there's certainly value to be able to give staff a Sunday off. And then I think it also adds value to have that admin assistance during the week when business is taking place.
Yeah, I mean, there are times I've been here when there's lines there. I mean, if you're gonna be able to shift the hours, I think shifting hours where they're needed more, I think is more valuable than holding something open that's not being used that much. I mean, anytime I've come in here on a Sunday, it's meant to be.
Oh, yeah, it was quiet
Use the
yesterday, I mean.
bathroom.
Well, and yesterday, you're talking about open houses and the number of open houses. I saw 3 non-marked open houses just driving from here to Starbucks. So I'm not sure that we're really stopping the, rogue realtors from putting up their open house signs by doing this Sunday plan. So I'd rather see that allocated to an inspector going around on Saturdays and Sundays and, reminding realtors that we have certain rules.
But that's the thing, labor isn't changing.
Right,
It's
it's
just $4,000 a
Yeah,
month.
it's reallocating.
How many Sundays is there an activity here? Ballpark?
I would say maybe 4 or 5.
Winter wonder.
I mean,
4 or 5?
4 or
Okay,
5.
so it's very few.
We're not talking a whole lot. And the other thing is, we do have an inspector that works 2 full days a month on Saturday or Sunday. And they are specifically looking for commercial vehicles, open houses, unauthorized open houses. So they are out there looking.
And Jackson, it's not our celebration realtors that are in violation.
Oh, I know it's not.
Mostly it's the town.
Oh, I know it's not. It's the guys from out of town that come in and pretend to be stupid.
And tell them that we have no covenants rules. Yeah.
Okay, it's a fractional amount of money. It's just a level of service. Is it worth it or not worth it question? I mean, it's just that simple.
I think it is worth it to give staff a break.
And to reallocate staff to other times when it's needed.
Where it's needed more.
Yeah, I'd close on that.
I'd close.
Vaughn, what would you do?
Get off.
I just don't see the need. I mean, if it's not being effective, most of our activity are the realtors, right?
We don't really have any data though.
And we're not really, how effective are we with the realtors on Sunday open houses? If we're not doing anything there, I just don't see the
They
point.
pay for the whole weekend anyway, so they're still paying for the whole weekend. It's $15, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's visitors from outside that are coming in to get maps for the open houses, not necessarily.
But those will be outside.
But they would be outside, right.
So I don't see the point in a Sunday workday, especially if it'll help you during the week, staffing, putting that person.
Since there are, what are your thoughts? And I'm just asking, is there a different perspective that you're not hearing? That we're not hearing?
Are the parks still being monitored?
Mhm.
You're still gonna have those people still.
It's just this building will be closed.
We close it every holiday weekend, and we
Right.
never get any type of kickback on not having Sundays open on holidays.
Yeah.
I do hear a level of service is important. I mean, I don't want to get, but I also don't want to get stuck in the level of service for a service that's not being used.
No, but I'm just thinking the opportunity. So when somebody works and their only day off is on a Sunday, so they can come in to write the check because they're old-fashioned for their CROA dues. They're going on a walk and this is the restroom that they could use that's in the area. I'm having a hard time, especially if we turn around and say, all right, we're cutting lifeguards, we're increasing dues, we're doing this, we're cutting this. At some point, we need to go ahead and look at the perception of the overall process. And maybe everyone else has, but I haven't seen any data that shows what the frequency of attendance is, how many phone calls are going on.
They just named it.
But I haven't actually seen any data that says what's
Well, they
going
should just
on.
named off what the day, I'm sure they can give a spreadsheet, if they just read off a
And
something.
then the very last thing is a matter of meeting space. We're always saying that we don't have a lot of meeting space and availability. To lock it off, I don't know.
We
But
can still
that's
rent it out for
available.
meeting
She just said
space.
they're not shutting that off, though.
We can
That's
still rent it
available.
for meeting space. You just have to pay staff time to have it.
Which they would do
What you were
anyway.
doing anyhow.
Yeah,
Right.
but they're just different roles. The staff that would come in to monitor the meeting wouldn't be the same staff that are working at the front desk.
Right.
I mean, listen, give it a try. If there's feedback from the community, I just think we need to visit it again.
Would you be interested in trying through the end of the year and then revisiting it in January and see how it worked? We could go from October 1 to the end of the year.
Go ahead.
I think that's fair.
Just from a community standpoint, I was here when we discussed it at least a couple of years ago. It went down to a reduction of hours in just basic services, that you were just gonna have the reception, and then everything else was gonna run through. You were going to look at it and decide at the reevaluation whether it would continue or close. So now it's the reevaluation. So is it
What
gonna,
if
based on, is it gonna continue or close?
What if Kevin, what if in the Friday flash, we said the board is having serious consideration of this and asked for comments? And we asked for comments and did that for 2 or 3 Friday flashes in a row, just to see if we get any comments.
Or just say we're gonna do it and just see what kind of response you get.
I guess my only concern with that is when nobody wants to hear that you're taking something away from them. Nobody wants to hear that. Even if, I have never been here on a Sunday my entire life, but the fact that now I can't do it anymore might make me a little upset.
David,
So-
Because the one time you need to use the restroom when you're on a walk.
And now I know I can't use it I can't use the bathroom on my walk, and that's okay.
Is there staffing challenges? Is that,
No, I
just need a
mean, we
break.
have the same person that's been working Sundays for a long time, but it's just a boredom, pretty much. It's just, once done with the duties that she could do, there's not much left to do.
Compared to Saturday, though.
to talk to her on Sunday
I was gonna-
I would much rather use that time where she's busy rather
Well,
than
that's the
just,
thing that I'm
yeah.
wondering, is if it's so quiet and we need to catch up on admin work, to me, that makes sense that it's quiet,
But it's
let's
different.
catch up on admin work.
But as we know, I mean, there's high standards for getting good results here, and it's not that she's not capable of it, it just makes more sense to have the department heads here during the week to help with that admin work. I mean, any of the busy work that someone can do is already being done, and she still gets bored.
Let's go for it. I would just be very, I would like to hear all feedback related to it. All
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, when you have a voicemail message saying that this isn't working anymore, or,
Good,
yeah.
bad, indifferent, from your team, from the residents, from the realtors.
Would you like me to forward everything to you, including voicemails, or would you just like me to keep a tick sheet of how many feedback responses I get? And send
I'm
that
just
to you?
very intrigued to see what.
I'm good with the tick, but I don't know if somebody else.
All right,
has a
start,
preference.
so you want to start at when?
I get enough voicemails.
I think you need to.
First.
Well, I guess what do you think the best plan for implementation for this change is?
October 1 to the
I
end
think
of the year.
it should be the first of the month. I mean, we could do through the end of the year and then reevaluate and see what kind of responses we got.
Yeah.
And then starting October 1st, go through the end of the year, and if we're overwhelmed with the responses, then look at it again
I
in
would,
January.
in your announcement, I would qualify that there is, that it is lack of activity. There is a serious lack of activity, and we are reallocating those individuals to busier times.
All right.
I mean, this,
90 days at October 1, and we just evaluate it. We've spent more time on this than I want right now. It's a fair conversation, but it is. Okay.
until you get your emails.
Committee budgets.
I'm not answering those ones.
I'm just saying. Ruby.
Committee budgets, what do we need to know?
Well, we've been through the budgets that were presented to you from the Special Events Committee, and we've had that conversation. The only other committee that provided a budget was the Technology Committee, and I can just read that to you real quickly. They asked for conference passes for $2,000. They asked for conference T&E. Susan, T&E?
Training and
education. That makes
right.
sense. $1,500. Renewable energy feasibility studies at $20,000. Electric charging station installation at $5,000. And then site visit, training, and education at $1,500. And that's a total of $30,000 that they asked for.
Steve ran away. He is the chair of that. I met with Jim, another committee member, the other day, and the main thing that they are trying to work on in the technology committee, their main focus seems to be electric car chargers. And when I spoke with Jim just a couple of days ago, their focus is the expense related to the electric to put it in, and any work that would have to happen. So I see that, but that also was back in June, May or June, that was handed over. They've evolved from that.
Can we ask you to review it with them again then?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and I'll review with Steve as well. I reviewed with Jim on Thursday of last week.
And Brian, you have a placeholder in the budget for it.
And I think that's all they're asking for.
Yeah,
is
it's
just-
in here for 30. But let's have, this one is clearly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just clarification, they will be responsible for implementing their electric car station? If
I don't know
that's-
how that looks yet.
Or is it a CROA expense recommended by the committee?
That would be the
Because
better
that's
way to say it.
different in terms of
That's
what
a
we're talking
better
about
way
in
to
terms
say
of
it.
budgets and when you're talking about committee budgets.
So that,
Special events uses it directly, still under CROA, but special events charges and spends that money. But that's what I'm wondering if this.
It's a new and evolving, if you will.
Is
It's,
giving money and they're spending it.
they don't have the checkbook,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
This is going to benefit non-residents,
They just need to know what they can work
CJC,
with.
not CROA.
but it's still going to benefit non-residents, not our residents charge their own at home.
Oh, right, I understand what you're
So,
saying. Right.
we're putting these in for non-residents to come.
Not necessarily. The location that was
Really?
discussed was at Lakeside.
It's still gonna be a non-resident, it's gonna use
Lakeside
it.
is-
You're gonna charge your electric car at home, right? Why would you go to Lakeside to charge your car?
Well, you would have to pay for it. It's not free. It's not free
I know it's
electric.
not free, but why do you need that there as a resident?
So you go downtown. If you go downtown,
So
just
you
as an
drive a mile
example-
downtown, and that's gonna discharge your car. You charge it at home.
If you have a different option for
I'm just saying it's a lot of
embracing
money.
the
I'm just saying it's a
technology.
lot of money for
Well, they were
residents have
talking,
to
I went
pay.
to one of their meetings, it was actually going to be installed free by Duke Energy.
The installation is
It was
free. It's
coordinated.
just, they need to know what they can work with when it comes to having the
So
actual
there's no
electric.
expense on our part?
I don't know what any expenses look like right now, other than I filled out the application with Duke, but Duke has told us all of the allocations that we have available for your area are already gone, so it's on hold. They said
And
to
there's,
stand by.
well, the new charging station up by, I think I just saw,
Georgetown.
up off, yeah, well, no, there's another one.
Now, I think that what they're asking for, a feasibility study, that's $20,000. That's an expense.
That's an expense.
I don't think
Lot of
they
money.
can spend $20,000 without coming to us.
Well,
I mean, I think,
Well, no, it would have to go in front of the board,
who would
but
go to
they're
the
asking you to put it in the
conference,
budget.
Well,
There's a conference fee on there. Who would actually go to the conference?
And what
Every
conference?
one of them, I believe.
Where are these things at?
Yeah, I think this is a very ambitious budget for a new committee, and I appreciate the fact that they're asking for everything, but I'd like to see something happen first before we allocate much money.
So let me kind of put it this way. They don't know what they can do because they don't know what's within reach for them.
Yeah.
Technology, I have somebody asking to put a monorail in town, okay? So I need to go ahead and let them know what is within reach and what's in their general scope.
I think that the plan overall was the objective of the resolution. So if there was a plan that was presented, then there could at least be some direction from the board on which one of the areas in the plan you want them to pursue with more intensity and getting quotes and those types of things.
Yeah.
It just almost seems like it's working backwards with numbers before you all even saying, we like this plan and we want you to move this forward.
Yeah, I'd like to see a plan.
yeah.
Monorail,
Typically,
that's a great idea.
typically committees operate by, they bring an initiative and they say, Board of Directors, we want to spend $20,000 on a feasibility study for whatever it is. And the board says yay or nay, rather than say, give me $30,000
And
I'll
I'll figure
do
out how
all
to
these
spend it.
things." Right.
And I didn't know, I wasn't sure where, you're talking about this being a CROA thing, where do you put chargers on CROA property? Where-
They've looked at a lot of different places, CJC, CROA.
I mean, Canoa I can see maybe, but CROA, I don't know what
All of
land we
those,
own.
yeah, all of those were submitted to Duke through that application, and like I said, Duke said, nothing available right now. We'll let you know when there is, but right now, there's nothing.
it was
available.
actually a free, the one meeting I went to, which was maybe June, they were brainstorming lots of things.
Okay.
So I guess the better approach that this board would like to see is just let them show up with their small and large ideas and just go about the path of yes, no, or turn around and say what is within their reach. And
Is
this
it-
is something that we can plan on.
Is it something that, because I know when the technology committee was formed, I was not on the board yet. As a result of the task force, they're putting new parameters in under technology for the charter review. Perhaps it can be a board-driven, this is what we would like the technology committee to do, rather than leaving it more, my understanding, it seems very open-ended right now, kind of, where do you want to go with versus the board directive?
Well, I
where-
think it's something that's new. It's,
Right.
you go ahead and create something, you don't necessarily have an idea. And the board, when the committee was created, said, let us know what you can cover.
Okay.
Technology covers everything from our recording systems here to.
I was thinking that the cameras, I mean, there's lots of different things that we can use that would all be part
They were,
of
when I went
technology.
to the meeting, they were talking about solar, they were talking about cellular coverage. They were investigating all kinds of things to see what, and when they went to these charging things, they'd heard about the Duke Energy thing, and they were investigating to see if it had any legs or not. They weren't recommending it per se, they
They're
were trying to figure out
learning.
if it was feasible or not feasible.
Correct, and they just don't know at this point what do they have to work with. What special events, as an example, not to throw you on the spot, you know that you have X dollars to host X events throughout the year, and the board's expectation is to deliver great events. That's the same concept that this committee is looking for, is what type of things do you want me to see? and that's written, in their resolution, and that resolution covers things like 5G, which could be anything. So they're trying to go ahead and find their way and find their lane without wasting the board's time at every meeting.
Help them do that?
So I think
By allowing them what budget works for them.
I think putting a budget line here is not the way to go. I think it needs to be more bottom-up. There were suggestions 2 or 3 years ago to do Weathermatic. Finally, that's bubbled up. The whole special events has grown based on their own history. The security cameras that we're talking about has bubbled up. So I would not support any budget line. I think they need to come up with ideas, and then they come up with a specific that says we want 28.5 to do this, or 58.7, and then that bubbles up over the years. There were proposals in the past 3 years ago, that's not here, to do thermal heating in some of the pools that become unusable during the winter months, and also unusable in the middle of the summer. So those were ultimately cost savings, but they're not here. So I think we need specific proposals to come forward from the committee, not give them a budget, but let the proposals bubble. And so in 2021, 22, then we'll have
So if I
something
may,
specific.
and I like what you're saying, I would like this board as one voice to share that with management, because when the different ideas were being brainstormed in committee meetings, Steve's response was follow the resolution and do the things that are written here in the resolution, which are 5G, car charging, those initiatives. So that's what they've gone about doing. So now we're going back to them and telling them, nope, just open it up, open whatever you'd like to do, and come to the board each time, talk about geothermal, talk about different things. It's going to be a lot more expensive, that path, and it's going to take a lot more time. So I'm happy to pass that forward to them.
I think
It's
that was a jumpstart for the committee.
going to be intriguing.
I think that was some specific things to start thinking about. And then as there becomes a new resolution in spring of '20, which we do every year, so there's some maturing of a committee and maturing of the resolution.
The resolution asks for a technology plan to include those items in there, so.
We have no plan.
No, that was my point, is that instead of focusing your energy on each individual piece, why not write the overall plan first and then present that plan to the board so
Which
that the
ties
board
back
can
to the
decide
original budget
which
of let's go
pieces.
to these fairs and functions, and that's what triggers that conversation. But now we're telling them not to do that, so I don't know what to say.
I think that's fair. If they're asking for 1,500 to go to conferences to help them to build their plan, then
Then ask
that
for that.
definitely is
Ask
something
for
that
that.
you all should be considering.
That's what they just asked for.
Well, we
asked for
didn't
30,000.
hear that, we heard the 30,000, just to be
That's-
clear.
Steve has it all.
Well,
Right,
it was
yeah.
on- that's what it was on there. I guess, here's,
I
well,
heard 2,000 for conference passes, 1,500 for training,
I
20
guess-
grand for feasibility study, site visits and charging
But
stations.
I'd like to see where the training, where's the
Specific-
training at, where are the conferences,
There's going to be some right here at the Gaylord or the Marriott.
So,
Maybe right
I
here.
guess I'm a little confused. Does the board want them to have a plan and do the work that it takes to get a plan, or do they want them to come with a specific item?
I don't think
Because
come
I'm
with a
hearing
plan
both
till they
right
get
now, and
trained,
I
right?
don't know.
Well,
I guess-
I would caution the board to not go away from your original direction of them that you gave them through resolution that you approved, and that was to develop a plan based on those objectives. Here's the things we'd like to see in the plan.
I guess
what I'd say.
my big question, though, I am not opposed to having committee members going to conferences and things like that. But we don't pay for any other committee member to go to conferences. I've never seen anything going for rec committee. I don't recall anything for the dog park committee, special events committee. I'm not sure that's a precedent I really want to go down, because there are personal benefits in which the resident will receive as a result of going. I'm not real comfortable.
That was my original feedback to them.
Okay, well, that's.
But
you can-
now we're all saying to tell them to develop a plan, so they're trying to find resources to create that plan.
I'm not comfortable with that, so,
All the other resources are volunteer.
yeah,
They're unfunded.
yeah.
Technology's pretty detailed. I mean, that's pretty specific.
But we have a lot of, we have people that do that.
Pretty technical.
But we have people on the committee that's their industry. I'm not, oh, that's why they're on the committee, right? That's why we've chosen them. I think that there's resources out there on the internet even, to where you can at least get some starting points to what you want to do with. It might even be on Facebook.
I read it on Facebook, it's true, look it up.
Can we have one of those technical qualified people come speak to the board about training, and then what they really need, what type of training they need to attend?
Can I throw out a completely different idea? We're sitting here with campers, and we're talking about spending $219,000. And that's really how I think of a bubbling up type item. Again, I went to a meeting, I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. They were a very interesting group to listen to. And there are a lot of people in there who have forgotten more about technology than I know. Technology is supposed to be one of our cornerstones. Somehow, we need to get technological issues bubbling up. I would hate to see us end up in a situation where the committee members all say, well, to hell with this board, I'm done, I'm gonna go home and play with something else, because I think that sets us back. If it was valuable to spend $5 million on a athletic field, it's valuable to spend some money on technology, and we need some stuff bubbling up. We all sit here and we talk about how hard it is to get cell coverage. I mean, these guys were talking to people at AT&T, they were talking to Verizon, they were doing these others, and they're doing real honest-to-God work. I'm worried, and I understand where Steve is coming from, I'm worried about, okay, if we make them do a plan, I'm not sure that's how any of these guys are thinking. It might be better to say, what we want then to come back to the board is 2 or 3, 4 areas that you're going to explore to bubble up. And, 30,000 is too much, so give us a new number. And then Kevin, Kevin works with them to say, here are 3 or 4 areas that they're really going to focus on from a technological standpoint to bubble up. And if they need a budget of X, then tell us what X is to really work on those 3 to 4 items. We as a board would say, this is great, these 3 or 4 items, like if we could expand cellular coverage around here and they could work with the proper carriers to get towers, which is what they were looking at, even where to put up. So, I mean, they were doing real work. Yeah. That would be valuable. So can we find a compromise?
TCC's on that now too, just as a side note, TCC's
Because
working.
we've gotten loud enough.
That
committee got very loud for it.
But they were also working with TCC. So I mean, these guys were, I don't want people to be confused. These guys were doing real work, so I don't want to kill them. That's what I'm afraid of.
So the best bet, as an example, and I have a gas guzzler, so I don't have a electric car, but as an example, they would like to come through with a electric charging vehicle. They'd like to come through with a green lighting inside of our buildings. These are the 4 things that they would like to do in 2020. And this is what they think it may cost. Okay?
Is that fair?
Exactly.
That's fine. I was trying to keep them at 30.
Good point.
Okay. On taxes.
You guys want more?
Okay, before I go to the board, because it's 4 o'clock, Susan, give them the 2-minute tax answer, which is not good, because nothing is
No,
right for us
no,
today
no.
so far.
We were charged CDD taxes on 2 parcels, parcel D and parcel E. When our CPA came and talked to Vaughn and Brian, myself and Steve, he says we should never pay taxes on our property. So I went to Osceola County, I called, nobody could answer the questions. Anyway, ended up with Gary Moyer, who consulted with his lawyer, and the bottom line is, the CDD attorney says, the property owned by CROA on the Civic Corridor does not qualify for exemption from ad valorem special assessments collected by the CDD because the property was not explicitly platted as a common element and further does not apply to the elements of Master Association's infrastructure that is intended to benefit all private residential owners within the community. So, what I've done is basically, it's $13,400 that we've paid in taxes. And I've sent that to our attorney, who Tom emailed me back today to say that he has experience with this in another county. And so he's gonna put that together and send it back to us.
So basically, we're still in negotiations in whether or not.
Maybe we get something, maybe we don't, but we're not gonna, it's like other parts of our budget, we're not gonna create something. So I've just made up a number, right, this IT budget is not, it'll be something, whatever it is. Supplies and equipment, 7, sheriff 4, We cut out the IT support position for expenses, which would be 35,000 in savings. We should say yes or no to that. But if that'd be 4551, we'd be at a magic number of a $204,000 negative number still. So after however many hours we've been here, it's still a big number.
Well,
Let's take it out of Kevin's paycheck.
And so it's taking us back to difficult conversations. Mary?
I think Mary Ann made a very good statement, and I think it flows back to the whole level of service. We don't want to cut back our level of service. If there are areas where we can improve them, I think that would be even better. What can we do better? Where can we improve? We hear a lot about our landscaping. I know we just talked about cutting the landscape budget. Is it an issue that we need to do something in order to make sure that our smaller community parks are looking better? Is that something that needs to be invested more in? I mean, I feel like I don't want to get caught back in we are short this amount of money, and so we just need to cut it. But I don't want to raise assessments just for the sake of raising assessments, so I want to qualify that too. But I think she made a very good point. We've increased our community assets drastically, which means there's more opportunity for you to go do a pickup game down in the fields where previously they were all booked with teams. Now you can actually go to East Lawn, you can actually go to Spring Park, you can actually go to your community parks, and you can play in those areas where you couldn't do them before because they were all booked up with sporting events. So.
And we enhanced our lifestyle events 2 years ago.
Yep.
Significantly. And we're playing catch-up of not having done an increase in homeowner assessments over 6 or 7 years.
Well, or even the cutback, because we did the cutbacks.
Just so you have perfect math here, we have 2% assessment changes equals the 80,000 that's in our budget right now. If we were gonna close out that 204,000, we better take the assessment change to 7%. So that, that extra 5% there is your $200,000 right there.
And ironically, that's what Canoa's going up by 7%.
What'd you say?
I said that's what Canoa's going up by 7%.
And, I mean, that's so, I don't want, I'm walking and standing just because I'm tired of sitting, so that's what I'm doing. But I mean, that's what you're talking about doing. And that's a permanent assessment change, because we're talking about run rate changes here.
Well, I think it's fair to say, though, that our expenses are only going to increase as we grow and as we age.
So if you're talking about just play this out. That's 7% this year, but next year it's not another 7%.
It's
No, next year would be inflation again, but I mean.
But then you deal with then you go back to the 2%.
Next year you have more revenue coming in from Island Village and less, you don't gain the new assets yet.
More spend.
As Bennett clearly said, it's a wash.
So here's something different to put in the mix. I know that this is a wash on our budget, but it's our trash service fees. So a question is, what is our level of service with trash? Because we have 2 daily trash pickups a week. Could that be reduced to 1? It's a question, and it would, theoretically, if there's only 1 trash pickup a week and 1 recycle and whatever, lawn thing a week, that lowers that fee, but the resident, I mean, it helps offset this. It might be a 1%, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this, just a question.
I guess my only concern, just from seeing my neighbors overflowing, it's just my husband and I.
raccoons.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, my husband and I, we don't have our garbage is probably pretty manageable, but there's lots of families with
But
big.
that's a question.
Right, I guess my concern would be, is it gonna be overflowing with garbage?
I don't know.
Because I know there have been times that even, especially over the holidays and stuff like that, where I've got stuff overflowing. We already have from covenants and standards, they're like, yeah, I'm not sure that's the direction you really wanna go.
I don't know if your contract allows you to do that. You maybe could
It's a year.
renegotiate for a new contract, but I don't think that.
We'd have to have a new contract, because it's year to year at this
Yeah.
point.
Just a matter of information.
I appreciate you bringing trash up.
It's not year.
Steve, still trying to figure out who the best point person for, because I did sign up, as a volunteer after a couple of months of trash being a requested item to look into, and nobody wanted to jump into it. So whoever the point person is that we could work with to talk about, to give everybody here a little insight of what I was trying to aim for. Our CCDD bills are written into our tax bill, which at least can be written off on our taxes each year. I would like to go ahead, since the money we take in for trash removal is a wash and goes right back out to Celebration Sanitation, I'd like to at least go ahead and look into conversation with the CCDD and have them take on the contract. That's the same exact cost, and at least save, it's a couple dollars, I know, but at least save the residents what they can write off each year on their personal taxes. Because they can write off their full property taxes, and it's not uncommon for your trash to be included in your tax bill. So
We're talking
why leave?
$250 or something?
The money's still the same. The money's still the same.
No, I'm just
But it
saying,
also goes
how
ahead
much
and-
are we paying in our CDD?
212?
For trash?
Nothing in CDD.
I mean,
Here.
how much are we paying for our
It's
trash?
around
I mean?
212. But point is, this is a conversation that I'm trying to find who the best person to talk to about.
We probably need to meet you and Gary Moore, sit down and have a conversation then, and just kind of gauge
Just
the
review.
interest on. I thought it was more about the increase, and to me, I didn't understand why we needed a meeting for that, because we just account for it when it comes to the budget for this year. But if you're talking about board direction wanting to switch it over to CDD,
I
then that's.
know that trash was a topic in Brian's emails for a couple of months, asking for a volunteer to address
We had also talked
concerns,
about recycling and how most of what we were doing for recycling was a waste of money, because we're actually, recycling costs more than trash, and they're throwing it all away.
Yeah, but I don't think we get a choice in that, though. I mean, I think
We could if we
could.
wanted to, because he did tell us we could
Oh,
do that. So I would look at the whole conversation, but if we move it to CCDD, I agree it would help a little.
That's a question that I would still like to
I
explore.
guess my only concern / question with moving it to CDD is my understanding of the CDD entity is it's not supposed to live on in perpetuity.
Well, somebody should tell them that.
Well, but I'm just saying that that's, our homeowner association's not going anywhere, so I think the premise behind putting it in CROA versus in CDD is because CROA shouldn't be going
It
anywhere,
is.
but CCDD
It is
should
without a doubt
gradually.
a premature conversation.
I'm just-
But something that I'm looking for management to give me who the best person is to go ahead and sit down and have
It's
this
Gary
conversation.
Moore. Yeah.
So, can I at least learn and review recycling?
I can reach
and
out to him tomorrow
everything.
and see if we can set up a meeting.
Yeah, I'll get some dates together for you.
I think the ultimate question, going back to the budget, is do we, as a philosophical matter, want to cut expenses, or do we want to raise income? I mean, I think that's really what it's going to come down to ultimately. I think this $200,000 number is too low. I believe the deficit will be bigger, in large part because of legal expenses. But even if it's just 200,000, and those numbers are all correct, we have to make a decision about whether or not we're going to find $200,000 in cuts, or we're going to, which means cuts in levels of service, or we're going to raise the fees to incorporate that. And I think everything else flows from that decision.
I think one of the, because the next, if you take item 6 in the agenda, which was a decision about next steps, I mean, I think one of the things we can do at the board meeting next week is have we have an action item there for, I believe, for briefing on the budget process.
No, we don't, but we can make it on
I
there.
thought we did. Okay, let's add it. And I think we say, hey, we got 200,000. At a board meeting, people will watch a board meeting. I mean, I think we could lay out the big picture. We had my first page there. We could do it delicately, nicely, and say at the end of the day, when we sliced and diced it all, we got a $200,000 issue. And we've either got to raise assessments, like, to raise
Business
it,
101.
or else we got to cut the meat
Increase.
grinder. I mean, we can either say we're making the decision, or we can tell the public this is the decision we got to make and ask for public feedback. Sometimes I've got shot when I've said, do you want public feedback? And sometimes,
I think based on the direction you're going in, I think if we say because we don't want to decrease level of service, We want to maintain our parks, we want to maintain our properties, we want to, if anything, we want to make them better. I think we are in a position to where we need to have it, we need to raise assessments. I think it's a modest amount. It's not, we're not asking for astronomical, we're asking for a modest increase. It's nothing that is, we haven't done this in a long time, we really haven't. And in order to make sure that we can maintain our community standards and improve them, we have to do this. We encourage feedback. I mean, this is what we want to do, this is the direction we need to go. Unless somebody says we really don't want to go down that direction, and I'm not hearing that from anybody in the board, I think it's better just to say, this is the direction we want to go, please share your feedback.
Yeah, I think it'd be really useful to just get nods at the head right now to get a feeling for whether people feel like we should go that direction to raise assessments at this stage, just as a general direction.
I think personally, as a general direction, I'm comfortable in saying that I think in order to make sure that we don't decrease our level of service, that we have to raise assessments.
I would agree with that.
Nobody wants to, but I think we have to, and there's a demand there. And I think copying, saying what Mary Ann said before and what I said to follow up was, I'd just like to review and make sure that we are hitting everything, and we are reviewing how the community is structured and who pays what and who shares what expenses and things like that. I think that's an important part if we're going to increase, which again, I'm in favor of doing, but I don't want to increase our residents' expense by making sure that other entities aren't covering their fair share.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking perceptually.
So Steve, if there were a 7% increase, what's the dollar amount per household?
It's a roughly $1,015. I could be
So
off a
it's
little bit.
nine-
What's the
That's
estimate?
what
It's
I'm
about
saying.
$47 more per house than the
It was, I think it was
931.
932 this year, and you're saying how much of that?
No,
932.
968 was what you have, and then I
Yeah,
added
but 968 was
47.
after the increase.
Yeah,
What was it?
949.32 is the
932 was
assessment this
19.
month, this year.
And what would a 7% increase get you?
It would take us to $1,015.77.
1015?
Which is-
1015.
It's an increase of about $50.
That's an increase of
70.
$70.
for ink.
Oh, because I was.
So 1015 from 9?
32.
932.
So $5.83.
Yeah, 949, 949 and 32 cents.
Oh, 949.
So my math is $5.83 a month per household.
Do that in quarters, please?
Just divide that $1,000 by
1,050,
four.
it's gonna be 250 for a quarter.
Somewhere around
there. And
That was so cheap.
Oh, that's a good point.
it, I mean, but somewhere here, we're not cutting services, we're not increasing services. We're reflecting the reality of the reserve study and the athletic fields coming on. I mean,
So that is an increase of service.
But it's
That's an increase of
that's
service.
an increase of service. I
That
don't want to get caught up in we have these expenses. No, we've just increased our services.
We have.
But may I say, be very, very careful about putting it out there because of the fields or something. We have to increase this. You have to be very careful now because you just added this and people are gonna say, but I don't use the fields and why do I have to? So you have to be very careful about how you word this as far as like, it just is. It hit us, we should have done this years ago, we need to raise this.
We haven't raised our
It
fund.
hasn't happened.
come on!
And I
Let's say what
actually think
changed.
I like even numbers, just make it even, but be very careful about that, because it will come back and bite all of you.
Oh, we know.
Yeah, I think it's
You know,
really,
and
I think
I
Debbie's
don't
point
think
is
you
really
need
important.
that.
I don't think we
Yeah.
demonize the fields. I've
We
certainly
can't.
been one of the biggest critics of that process. But the fields exist, we've paid for them, they are good, we have done the right thing. Now the reality is that it is a new level of service, it is a new amenity, and it is part of all of Celebration, it's not standalone. And while we get into the weeds of each line item, to the community as a whole, I think the messaging, JR, needs to be exactly what Debbie just said, that we are
JR is
doing
not
something
that much
for-
expensive, good morning, let's be perfectly clear.
This is the budget.
But I don't
But it's an
with
aging
your
community
messaging.
too. So I mean, you know, something could happen to another pool or something like that. I think the
Aging community, building
is going
reserves.
to understand that, because
Absolutely.
as a homeowner, we all know it. We know that we have to, if everything keeps falling apart on us and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the only thing I'd say.
Thank you,
At
Debbie.
the same time, we have the piece that we've talked about that we don't have the answer on yet, and that's with lifeguards.
Yes.
So here we raise assessments by this, and we may be cutting lifeguards.
Well, if any,
Just
if
so
any
it's-
reductions are coming from the operating budget, that number's gonna go down.
Right.
But right now,
But
I
our
don't have
reason-
any direction to cut anything.
But if we end up doing anything with lifeguards, it will not be because we are decreasing our level of service. It will be because of legal implications. And I think we just need to make sure that is what's
But the
communicated.
messaging would go hand in hand with this.
Well, unless we can time it so that it doesn't.
I really worry that sugarcoating this message causes us to go down this damn path again with a community center or something else. I mean, the reality of the matter is this was not well thought through. I already said I'd like to have it, and you'll hear it at 6. I'm gonna be there at 6. I have Jason plan. You're gonna hear it at 6 tonight. I think we ought
Good, I don't
to
have to
push
go.
for a charter revision to make sure that we actually think about reserves and run rates on stuff. And I'm struggling with it's going up 7% because we're the board and we love you and nothing's changed. I mean, we've had a huge change.
But we've had more than just one huge change. The problem is the dollar amount matches with the dollar amount here. But the reality is, we also have a huge expense in other things.
Well, we had $105,000 on reserves, which would have been offset by the $114,000 contra revenue reduction. Or we can argue that the contra revenue reduction would have offset the $259, and we've got a couple of offsetting items, or they don't offset. I mean,
But it's not, my point is that there's no cause and effect relationship.
That's right.
I know you disagree with me, but I don't think there is. I think the reality is, we have this beautiful civic corridor, and we need to make sure that we're selling it, and we need to maintain it. Not just there, but everywhere in our community.
I think if nothing else, we could all learn something on behalf of the community for future projects that we plan.
This is your problem.
That I would agree.
What's that?
You inherited this.
We did.
this is our inheritance.
You have to solve it. You have to
Usually inheritance is an asset.
solve the problem.
Except when you're on a board.
I mean, maybe we could sell naming rights to the field. You know, I think that at the end of the day, Brian, you're absolutely correct about why it's happening, but I think for most of the residents in the community, that's inside baseball. I just don't think that they're gonna go and do that kind of in-depth research and look at the numbers and try and figure it out. And they're gonna ask the obvious question, which is, why is my assessment going up? And then they're gonna.
You're the back porch expert. What are you gonna do when the back porch says assessment went up by 7%, and I don't see a change, what's the change? I mean, are we gonna not answer any
Well,
of
let's
these
go back,
questions?
let's
Come
go back
on.
to history. Last year, everyone went crazy about the assessments going up because we did 2%, but the reason was the magazine.
Right.
The magazine was the reason why the assessments went up.
Which
Not
wasn't
cost of
true.
living,
Right,
not.
which wasn't true, yeah.
In fact, it actually helped our
Mhm.
numbers. But it's the same thing. Now we're just looking at a much bigger animal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
perception.
think we win on Facebook. I think we just, and I refuse to legislate or govern based on Facebook. I know, call me crazy, but the right thing to do is to balance our budget. This is what it takes to balance the budget and to provide this particular amenity, which we inherited and which we have doing the best we can with, and it's an asset to the community. I don't know what else we can say to
Then
people.
fine, this is the cost of fully implementing the amenities along the civic corridor.
Yeah. Yeah.
There'll be code for anybody who wants to live at this meeting.
Well, could you take that opportunity to say, as we start reviewing our master plan for the next 10 to 15 years, this is going to be an expectation moving forward. If you want this, it's going to, I mean, anything that we add is going to have a cost to maintain it.
Absolutely. You know, we've never put an asset into play here that's been anything the size of this complex, not even close, not this building, not anything.
Nothing.
And we said in the Recreation Committee, what, a year and a half ago, Joseph, that this was going to change the paradigm for the community, because you've got so much invested in it, you've got so much going on, you've got so much to run it, you're gonna have to pay for it and do all of those things. So here we are. I mean, this is the first time we've crossed this threshold, but it will not be the last. And so if we act responsibly now, we set a precedent that I think helps a future board. They may not appreciate it, but I think we set a precedent that's right. I think to do anything else is counterproductive.
Can I also make one suggestion that might help soften the sting a little bit? That's probably not gonna be a pleasant conversation, so I apologize ahead of time, but I'm easy for that. What I was talking earlier about, do we wanna do key card accesses to things, right? Key cards for, you get a key card in order to get into your pool, you got a key card in order to get into your dog park, key card to get into the athletic field. Do specific, there's a walkway, right, strictly for residents. If you have key card access, why would that be any different from being able to go into the dog park area? If they come in, sign it, do a walk. My husband loves walking back there. I got 2 emails literally sitting here saying, hey, don't forget to talk about how I can actually walk on the path. We talked at one point in time about North Village, right? We really want to make that a walking path, a boardwalk going from North Village across. How can we, it doesn't have to be now, it doesn't, as we start to improve our assets, how can we make it so that we can use the pathway, so that we can go and access our amenities at designated CROA times? We will, if we're gonna be having staffing up at the field, up at the complex, if we end up doing that,
If we're
right?
gonna have key card access up there, then we probably need to move staff from town hall out there and have them out there full-time.
But those are all conversations, I think, that we should be having in order, if we're going to tout amenities that we have, then we need to have access to the amenities. So I guess it's one of those things, it's chicken or the egg, but I think it's still, either way, we're gonna have to have either scrambled eggs or chicken breasts. So I'm just saying, we need to figure it out. And I think it needs to be something to where if we have somebody that wants to walk on the pathway to get through to North Village, we need to be able to have an ability to do that and trust that our owners are not going to go and destroy our fields. So.
Bon, you have any thoughts, comments?
I just think how to bring this to the public, like Debbie was saying earlier. The 2% was our inflation. That's pretty much every year we're figuring 2% cost increase in contracts, et cetera. And then the 7%, which is an increase of 5 over the 2, I think we present it like Debbie was saying, it's not to make up the costs that we haven't planned for in the past, except for operating an amenity. The field's gonna cost money. You don't get 100% back by renting the field. You don't get 100% back on the cost of operating that field every year, $265,000 or whatever it is a year. The run rate, you're not gonna get back. When we build the community center at some point, if that's what the town wants to do, you're not gonna get that money back. If it costs you $6 million, $8 million, whatever it costs you to build a community center, the rentals of those rooms or whatever they happen to be inside, you're not gonna, the run rate, you've got AC units, you've got all kinds of maintenance costs, et cetera. You're not gonna get that money back. So we have to present this as, when you increase your amenities in a town, it costs money to run those amenities. And it's not, we're not maintaining, we're increasing our assets and the beauty of our
The
town.
cost of maintaining the assets.
We have to take notes from Disney. Every time they build a new attraction, their ticket prices go up, but they get away with it, so we'll just do the same thing.
Okay, so, item 6, decision regarding next steps. We will summarize poetically next Wednesday at the board meeting that we're looking at a 7%, God help us, 7% assessment increase and looking for feedback from the community. That would keep services where they are today and maintain all of our beautiful assets, including our new beautiful assets.
And if we're gonna get direction next Wednesday to stay with the expenses not cut, and it's gonna be a 7%, then on October 1st or 2nd, I believe, we have to get the letter out with the summarized budget and the cover letter and all that, if you're gonna vote on this budget at the end of October. So we're looking at just a few days after the board meeting.
Are we going in October or November on the budget?
We'd like to get it done in October if possible. I know it has been pushed to November in the past, and we've done earlier meetings, but if we can get it done in October, that would be.
Well, I'd like to see a revised budget, because we had those changes up there, you had one earlier today, so let's.
Are we reducing those?
Do we agree
Because I
that we're
didn't get
reducing
direction from
IT
you guys on
support?
that.
Or not?
With the
Sorry?
IT budget?
The IT support was subtracted to come up with the 200.
You're talking about that technology that was 30 grand?
No, I'm talking about the 45K that was reduced to 35 up there.
Oh, okay.
That was the IT support in the
Right.
communications budget.
I agree with that.
But we didn't have.
But that was the
to cut it,
CJC.
did we?
Of course we did.
It's still overall.
Well, it was.
Yeah,
I
it's
just
like
I just saw the
204, so-
I just saw the 280 at 70%, that's what I was looking at.
Oh, that's,
Got it, we're good.
that's 250.
Okay, I'm gonna write down the cut.
So what's
Yeah,
IT,
right there.
what's IT budget taking it down by 10? Is that the,
That is
Technology
the
committee?
Technology committee.
Wait, what's IT support again?
I
I'm sorry.
take that down.
That's an
IT
extra
support,
position.
remember in the CJC where they had put in a support position below Patrick?
From the executive
A new position,
session
yeah.
where we discussed organization and
Right.
who
So you
needed
have to
what.
bite the dust. If that's what we're saying up there right now on that board, or otherwise,
I mean-
we're doing 8%.
I know that. I just want management to have who they say they need and the positions they need to get done what they level of service.
Okay.
And that was their recommendation, but if everybody's okay
Well,
with
no,
that.
no, no, I'm asking a question. So what is the difference between having or not having that position?
Not now.
You're asking me?
Hmm?
Well, that position, when we discussed it, was to go and do just in-office computer, email, those types of things. I can tell you, since we've allocated front desk more to business office and Patrick to solely concentrate on IT, he's had more time. What really takes up a majority of his time is projects, when he's working on major projects. So
On cameras.
Right, and projects don't run all the time, so I would consider that a nicety, not a necessity.
I guess the one thing, like the sheriffs, removing the sheriffs on there.
That's a cut in half. It
That was to cut the budget down to half versus having a fat budget.
Right, no, and I hear you. I just, that was the one thing that I felt, that the community really seemed to appreciate the fact that we went above and beyond to make sure we had the coverage. I think we're getting penny wise and pound foolish by
Yeah.
cutting that. That's just my personal.
I agree with you on that.
On that one that's listed IT budget, which is technology committee, I would put that at 30, which is what they proposed.
Cut the entire 30, I was.
I would for this coming year. And put the
I
sheriff.
don't,
put the
but
sheriff-
regardless of whether they have a budget or they spend
You don't have to
funds, I
spend
think
it,
you gotta
yeah.
have some funding there, or otherwise you're gonna disband the committee.
Yeah, I think having it there in the budget's okay, and we have to, still have to approve it, no matter what.
So that means.
But you're saying
that
bring it
means
down to
leaving-
just 10,000 though, right?
That means leaving 20 in the budget. That means leaving 20 in the budget.
Right.
You could leave
I
20.
think that's way too much.
You can leave 20 in there, doesn't mean you have to spend it, though. At least it's there if we need it. You know, we're gonna
I
authorize.
think
the-
we
I
clear
understand.
things in. I still think
I
that's
guess
too much.
the conversation, I mean, cut it all, cut the whole thing,
Well,
and
by the
as, no, that's fine. As the committee shows up, then we'll have to just scrounge the money from
But then
capital
we're
to
spending money
address
that
what
we
they
never
want.
budgeted. That's
Correct.
not a good way to do it. I'm happy, I have a problem asking a committee to come up with initiatives that are gonna cost money and having no money in a budget, because then I have no problem if you wanna take the 20 and say it's not for seminars. They've got a soft budget of 20 that has
gotta
to
get
come from this.
approved.
Yeah.
They have a soft budget of 20,000 that has to come to the board to be percolated up. Go ahead.
Can I please suggest that you put that as a general committee operating budget, and then each committee, as if they have a need, comes forward and says, I need such and such money to do this. It gets approved, comes out of that budget. It then, when the budget is done, it's done. That's-
So
people-
covenants-
So committees
covenants
can
can
then
come
plan and go, well, the overall
So it's not
budget.
specific.
I think you have revenue generating committees and non-revenue generating committees. Just like any business, you have like guest services
Yeah.
where it's
So-
customer service, they don't make money, they just make you happy. And then you have somebody that actually rents the space out and they make the money. So we have to look at each committee individually as what they are and what their function is in a business. I just don't know how you create a department, if you will, and say, okay, stand there, figure something out, impress me.
But again, you can budget.
I don't know what to
you
do.
can budget the money under a general situation that it's budgeted for, but you're still asking for the committees to come forth and say, we need the money for this particular thing, and it's you have that money set aside
That's
regardless.
essentially how capital, I guess, has been.
What if we called it technology general? And we knew it was there, but we weren't specifying so much for the committee to make it broad, so that way.
A technology budget.
Or
Which I would
Technology
probably
enhancement
remember,
budget?
Town hall.
That could go
network,
towards
have a separate
recording.
lines underneath that.
Well, I guess my thoughts are twofold. I hear what you're saying because we want to make sure that that the committees actually have the ability to reach out, to get to access cash if they need it for situations. I guess the flip side of that, though, is we're really behind in technology, and it's one of our cornerstones. And I think having a line item budget for a cornerstone, I think is a little bit different. So I guess I could look at it both ways.
I mean, it is different, but we have an ARC covenants,
But
we have people, that's part of your place, if you will,
Yeah.
right? So we were talking about Jeffrey earlier and what's budgeted towards that. We
Right.
have recreation, could go under place, community as well. Like,
There's places for it.
there's places that you can look and you can go through that budget and actually probably mark off a cornerstone of what everything falls under.
Right.
And if somebody can help me, what to inform that committee and tell them, hey, come with us with something reasonable, that's where I'm trying to go, and stop the meetings that they keep showing up for something extravagant, because they don't know. They're just
Right.
playing a guessing game. If I throw this at them, maybe they'll approve it, maybe not. So they need to know what's within reach. And that's the reason why they're developing a number like 30. They're trying to find something in reach. But, I mean, if we did something in reach with the fields, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in. We need to know what's realistic. And that's all I can ask for the board.
I hate to keep coming back to this, but I think there's $50,000 of additional legal expense that we aren't taking into account. So no matter what you do here, that number is, I know, sorry, Brian. That number is preliminary, and I think we're in the weeds here trying to figure this out and make it balanced today. There are some things that you've asked us to look into over the next few days. I think we need to do that before we can do anything else on any of these items. Not to say that they're not important, they are. But really, are we going to care about the $4,000 for sheriffs if we have a $50,000 additional legal expense?
Yeah, the honest answer is we got $1,476,000 of operating cash right now. So we need to be careful here. We're not bankrupt. We're not worried about how we're going to pay our bills. We're trying to be prudent and responsible.
But we have just under the CAI recommendation.
I would personally very much like to keep $20,000 in there and have something percolate up and learn and just say, whatever they percolate up, it's got to come to the board, there's got to be communication, and we got to approve it. And maybe we'll spend $6,000, maybe we will spend 20, maybe
they'll get grants for the whole thing and
we'll
actually
see where
make
it
us money.
goes.
I don't know. But
If
they have to know what's within reach.
if we have another 50,000 of legal bills, I don't want to budget it, but we'll just deal with it.
Well, you
At
brought-
least that's a one-off.
You also have a projected $112,000 surplus.
Yeah.
By the end of this year, that could help.
But that's
cover.
in the cash here that we've kind of talked
Right.
about too.
Okay.
So financially, we're okay from that perspective. I'm more worried about, we need a run rate balance.
An event's just going to help us out.
So, do we want to, okay, are we being kitty-wise with this sheriff? Do we want to keep sheriff at 10 or not?
Keep the sheriff at 10.
Keep it at 10.
Keep him at 10.
Okay, so that goes away.
Sheriff stays at where it is.
Sheriff stays where it's at.
Supplies and equipment was real because we were gonna use.
Yeah, that's in real number.
Although I think we need a real copier. I think we ought to be asking, should we move a lot of the rec committee people out there into that one big room, set up the offices out there and have people out there, because then we could actually monitor better. I think that would actually be an intelligent thing to consider, Nikki. And then we put a real copier out there, but we also control, watch, and monitor things better in the best way possible. So with that as background, the 7% is still predominantly holding. We're going to talk about it at the board meeting next week. Then, we lost, oh, right here. Okay, service area budgets and next steps. Vaughn and I are meeting with Susan and Susanna tomorrow afternoon. Coming out of that meeting,
I'm going to figure out how to build something that will come to the full board. We as a board are going to have a meeting to talk about the service area budgets. I mean, because of what's going on with reserves and because of the fact that they all are penny wise and whatever that may be, I think we have to have a meeting. So we're going to have to actually get something set. Can we charge? Rachel was figuring out with Susan when we're going to have that meeting, and it's probably something that needs to occur, well, in the not too darn distant future.
Well, we could do it September 30th in the daytime. That's a week before our October 7th workshop. I mean, if we're looking at October,
September,
It'll
can
depend on
everybody look at their
the-
calendar for September 30th? And
Rosh Hashanah.
Came on that count?
We're looking at September 30th.
September 30th. Okay, for me, September 30th is wide open.
I'm good.
I'm good.
So everybody's good with September 30th?
Mhm.
What time on September 30th?
I'm free in the afternoon, but it's all right.
There's a recreation committee meeting in the afternoon, I believe. Am I right?
Service area.
I think Susanna's leaving around 3.
I have a class that day.
You have a class?
For my CAM license.
All right, can we do it with Susan and Susanna?
As long as
They
we're
know a
done by
lot
3,
more
we're just
about
gonna leave
the
before
service
that. so.
Can we do it at 1? 1 o'clock?
Do it from 1 to 3?
Okay.
1 to 3 on the 30th. Rachel, invitations, please.
Susanna, is this just for the service area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you do this, can you do that? Okay.
1 to 3.
1 to 3 on the 30th. And it'll be my problem to get materials out, working with Lon. CCS budget, approach and review. How do we want to tackle it?
Right, can I ask,
Go ahead.
we missed E on here, and that's pretty important, the 4th of July. It may take a lot more time,
Well,
but
we said we
need
were
some
going, we said
direction.
we were going to wrap that into the CCS budget. They intentionally said I had
They're
to.
two, it's a twofer.
Okay, so when we do our CCS meeting, then we're going
That's
to have
what
that
we're going to pick,
conversation?
we're going to pick the time right now for the CCS budget.
Gotcha.
I think what we have to do in the CCS conversation is we have to start with, here's the cash, here's posh
Well,
pooch.
wait. Just to clarify, I'm okay discussing this here, because it's been on the agenda. I am not okay with the lump where it was listed on with the budget. That was my issue, so I just wanted to clarify. I have no problem at all, because it's noticed, it's on here, discussing CCS and 4th of July plans.
And it's,
So,
and it's
I just-
4:40, I don't want to start at
It is
4:40.
listed.
No, I don't think it should have ever been listed. I
Okay.
think CCS
So
should
let's
never
go to
touch
CCS.
CROA.
So when we have the
If they
CCS
truly are
budget,
separate.
Vaughn and I will dream up a budget, which will look a whole lot like the 2019 budget. We're going to talk about the 4th of July. We got to make a decision. We talked about a couple of brainstorming ideas today. I mean, it is what it is, but we need to have a meeting to talk about CCS, because we have not had a board meeting. We've been waiting on the darn financials, which we still don't have.
Can you do it an hour before the next board?
Do you think we can get like the next, like,
An idea?
an idea as to when?
You got information. Okay, well,
September 30th.
Yeah, can we have
That's
it,
the 25th, right?
can we have it on the 30th? Can we
The
do
next board
CCS on the
meeting, yeah.
30th?
Well, I'm out of training for my CAM license.
So you've gone the entire day?
That day and the next day.
Can we have the CCS meeting an hour before the next board meeting on the 25th?
We have executive.
We
On
have
the September
executive session
20th.
Oh, that's
for
right.
2.5 hours.
Oh, yeah.
What do we have? We have executive on,
How about right after the board meeting?
do we have an invitation for that? Because I don't have that on my calendar.
You
Can
don't
get
yet.
an-
I don't
Rachel, we
have
need
that.
we need a invitation.
Just tell
We
Susan.
don't yet, and simply because we were trying to
Yeah, it didn't show up on mine.
coordinate everyone, which
All right.
just fell into place a couple
All
hours
right,
ago.
invitation's
Oh.
out. When do we want to talk about CCS? We can we probably should just have a board meeting is what we should do.
The CCS board meeting, yes.
Can we do it before, on the 30th, before service area?
I just won't be here. I mean,
What
you
day?
can do it without me.
So the one we just set up, September
Why don't
30th?
we do it right afterwards?
Or
Monday and Tuesday.
or on the 7th with our workshop.
We have a CROA workshop on November 7th.
October
October
7th, I
7th.
apologize, October 7th. we could, it's from 9:30 to 11:30. We could do CCS at board meeting at 11:30?
I will not be here that day, so you
I
guys will
will.
go on, but
Can you call in?
I booked a cruise, I'm out.
Well, we're running a little shy on time now, Kevin. You want-
All right, what about-
Do you want to leave
No,
something?
I'll stay off of it, no, you're fine.
I won't be here either.
Okay, Bob, well,
Just wanna let you
okay,
guys
we're
know
down
that I
to,
won't be
let's,
I'm out
Just
west.
for clarification, the CCS budget doesn't have to go out to the community for approval, though, it's just you all approving that.
Right, but
And
we
there's
want
no
to
leverage.
notice that we're discussing
You have to do a
it.
48-hour week, I don't
Yeah.
think, that's been
Yeah.
tradition
Yeah.
for 48 hours.
So you can
just
do
want
it
notice.
on Monday, the 30th, after that meeting, or if Steve wants to be present, you're gone Monday and Tuesday?
Correct.
Stick with Wednesdays?
We could do it at 3:30 on the 30th, or 4 o'clock.
I can do 3:30 on the 30th.
I can make it.
There is a
okay,
recreation
we
committee
have,
meeting that day.
okay, we,
What time?
3 o'clock. Right, it's 3 o'clock.
on October 23rd, we have a CROA board meeting. Do we want to do it right before the CROA
I
board meeting?
think, do you need anything before then?
The earlier the better, because I mean,
That's, because, I remember, yeah, 4th of July, the sooner he gets stuff booked, the better it is.
The lower the budget is.
October should still be plenty fine.
And I think I can be available on the 30th, Susan's offered me another option.
Oh, wow.
That sounds a lot more appealing to me than the option that I was
It's the 30th.
Okay, so on September 30th, I mean.
Say
I can
3:30?
meet on the 30th, yes.
So we're gonna do service area
1 to
meetings at
3
1?
service area. Do we want to do CCS at 3?
3.
3.
Sure.
Okay, so CCS will be at 3 on the 30th.
This is a CCS board meeting,
Yes, CCS board meeting.
3 to what?
And I
3
pray
to
to,
4.
I pray to God we have the financials because we need them.
It seems
Okay.
like maybe there was something there.
The audit, no.
Item 9, we had talked about having a community lynching, or I mean, meeting. General update, and facilities master plan. So we would do the Parks and Recs master plan as update as part of that, and then a general Q&A type thing. We'd start with alcohol to get the crowd raucous, and then have the meeting. We talked about it. We said we were going to pick a date when we were going to do this, so
We might want to do it a little bit before or after the announcement.
I think the announcement goes out.
Excuse me just a minute. Vanessa,
Yes.
you sent out an invitation to the CCS, so did I.
Oh, I actually did not mean to send it out as a group invitation. It must have been the
Yeah,
option,
yeah.
it must have been
Just
the option I clicked on my
Ignore
phone,
Vanessa's
sorry.
and approve.
I will delete
Rachel's.
it.
Okay, so when do we want to try to have the community meeting? It would obviously be a evening meeting. Debbie's giving me this quizzical look. Remember how we had to have your meeting where, I mean, I think we literally would start with the wine and cheese, the way we've done historically. It would, I think we'd start with kind of an intro by me. I think we would go through Parks and Master Plan. What we talked about was David would create 8 slides. And we'd go through 8 slides, it would take 40 minutes, it'd give people a nice overview, and then we would have an hour and 20, or Steve's gonna do the first one, working with David. But then we'd have an hour and 20 minutes of, we'd give a briefing, we could talk about the budget, we'd talk about the launch of the field and crap like that, go into Q&A session, and it will be what it'll be. What day are we talking about?
Is there a day of the week that we found that is better than others for any of our stuff?
It's also room access, right? We're talking about room.
Room access, yeah, when do you have rooms access, yeah.
Well, daytime, you
Yeah,
know.
no, this is night, this is night,
To like
this is,
6 o'clock, which means we're running into task force meetings, which are booked, like, yeah, if it's open, it's booked.
it doesn't matter, we
We could probably find a 6 to 9 on any of the weeknights.
Do you
What
want
about-
6 to 9 or 6 to 8?
Or 6 to 8, I mean,
6
I'm
to 8.
sorry.
Thursday the 3rd, is that a day that works for people or not?
October?
October.
I'll be out of town, but you can still do it. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just one.
Yeah, I'll be out.
Kevin's out of town, and Vaughn's out of town.
Still got a quorum.
Yeah, you still got it.
We could do the next week, if that's better.
October 9th or 10th.
I'm out of town next week. That's next week.
October 16th or 17th?
Oh, no,
Getting
I'm
too
October
far out then?
16th or 17th.
16th, 17th, I'd be fine.
October 9th or 10th?
Yeah, I can't do 9th or 10th.
So you're good,
Oh, I
16th or
can't do,
17th?
I can't do the 17th.
What about
Sorry.
16th?
The 16th.
I can
What
do
about the
16th.
15th or the 16th?
I can do 15th,
So
or I can do
Wednesday
16th.
is-
Either one.
I could do 16, not 15.
So
Okay, 16.
16?
16, 16, 16, 16. We have
October
16.
16th.
That's a Wednesday.
That's a Wednesday.
Wednesday, the 16th.
Wednesday,
October
October.
Town
16th,
hall, the town hall.
town hall meeting,
And what time?
6 to 8.
6 to 8.
Assuming that this room is available?
We have to check on availability. Nikki, she may be frantically doing that right now.
October 16th.
It's confirmed?
That's the
The
third.
16th.
Yeah.
Yeah. 6 to 9,
That's the
6 to
third
8.
Wednesday, I'm pretty sure.
It is.
Does that mean something?
Bingo.
Bingo?
Oh,
Bingo.
yeah.
Every third Wednesday.
Oh, we can do bingo at the same time. That could be fun.
Actually, we can just have the bingo contribute to their meeting.
Yeah, you can't do it on the same night as bingo.
So we were,
What about the
we were
15th?
overruled on bingo.
15th?
I can do the 15th, somebody else could not do the, oh, if there's another day other than the 15th, I would prefer it, but I will suck it up if I can.
Halloween.
Well, tennis Tuesdays, and I'm done on Tuesday night. As he witnessed last Tuesday, it was not pretty.
Is 15th better? Okay, the 15th is perfect.
Not for me.
Okay, well,
15th, not.
since we got you speaking for 40 minutes. It has to work, no, it has to work for him, you're the one
It
talking.
needs to work for David if he's got one.
How about
You're the
Thursday,
town
the
hall.
17th?
Thursday, the 17th won't work for me.
I thought, what was wrong with
What
the
was,
16th?
I was,
Bingo.
bingo.
The whole space?
Yeah.
Do we really have to, I mean,
Well, it's, what
You
was
don't have to have
wrong?
everybody
precedents
here.
over stuff?
Wait,
Trust me,
Yeah.
you
You
do,
don't want-
but
do you
you don't
wanna-
want to go down
we don't
that.
want to mess with bingo. What was wrong with the week of the 7th? Who was out of town?
I'm out of town.
You're
I'll be
gone,
gone.
gone, you're gone, gone. Okay, and what about the week of the 1st?
Is it?
I'm going.
You're gone, that whole week of the 1st.
Yep.
Is it,
All week.
I know this is not conventional, but to do it at a location other than this building?
You just won't be able to do live streaming and.
But could we record?
We can record.
If we didn't do live
It
stream,
doesn't have to be live stream.
We can record.
Oh, maybe we can use our new building up at the rec, or up at
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna be enough there.
oh, that would be really
If you
cool.
want-
He's like,
Bingo,
no.
I mean, people come to bingo.
Put them on
Alright.
field.
Do it under the pavilion.
Yeah.
How many
Well,
people
and
come to bingo?
People would sweat and leave.
And you talk about pitchforks and torches, we've been down that path before. You
Don't do it.
No.
Don't mess with the bingo people?
All right. We'll leave bingo alone. We don't want to wait too much longer, do we? Past, well, the week
The
of the
23rd is the meeting.
23rd is.
At some
meeting.
point,
What-
okay,
What if we
at some
extend the board
point,
meeting for
at some point you gotta ask, do we do this?
I think we have to do this.
Can you just give the updates out of board meeting?
Can we make that board meeting, yeah, an extra hour? Or, you know, since we're all on the 23rd.
Or just consent all your agenda items like you did at the last meeting and then spend the rest of the
Well,
time answering questions.
maybe we do from 5 to 6, make that the community meeting and the update, and then do our regular meeting.
Okay, is everybody here on October 23rd?
Yes.
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 So let's take that evening, we will agree that we're going to have flexibility for management to come back to the whole board with a
Okay, we'll do it.
recommendation on how to structure the evening. We will start it with wine and pitchforks. We will build in the parks and facilities presentation. We will do Q&A. We will do the board items we have to do, and it will be a flexible evening.
How about like from 5 to 6, let's just schedule the whole thing early, start the regular meeting at 5,
Yeah.
get the regular meeting done as quickly as you can, and then after that, turn it into the town hall meeting.
Yeah.
But you want to vote, though, on October, at that October meeting.
Well, you still have, it's an action item meeting, it's.
So you're talking about voting on the budget. When are we going to vote on the budget?
At that meeting.
That meeting.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we're going to vote before
on the budget and then
the
hear it.
actual
You
town
could
hall
flip it
meeting.
then, you could do your town hall meeting
I think we
first
do
and
the,
then
I think we
vote.
do the town hall meeting and then move into the regular meeting.
But you have to
I
keep it
think
to
you
an
have to do that
hour.
first, yeah.
Or an hour and a half, you can go 5 to 6:30 and then say your regular meeting's gonna start at 6:30.
I see what.
It's taking longer to
We
just
have a
say this
CROA
than everything
workshop
else.
on the morning of November 4th. Why couldn't we pass the budget on the morning of November 4th?
Good?
And so I'm trying to think outside the box here. So we take the 23rd, we deal with the necessary action items, and we do a briefing on everything, and we do the vote on November 4th, which is not much later, and final budget. Is that a fair approach?
So are you doing the town hall on the 23rd?
Yes.
We're still working on it.
Yes, the town hall is still 23rd. You can just put from 5 to 6 town hall, and then we'll figure out the logistics.
Okay.
And then November 4th.
Yeah, we'll figure out the logistics. Kevin, you're frowning.
No, I'm not.
Are you,
I'm fine. I'm just trying to
Okay.
figure out.
So, do we agree? November 4th, we would pass the budget, and October 23rd, Steve and others are going to come back to us with a recommendation on how to structure the evening, and we'll all comment. But we're going to take enough time to do the town hall and everything. We may do the board action items. I think doing them last would be crazy. So I think we have to do the board meeting first with the action items, and then we go into the thing. But we got to build time in here for people to relax and conversation. And I mean, we made it an event. We want to keep it an event type thing. Fair enough?
And we want the tables that are the tall tables where you're open, you don't want it to feel like this, right?
Right.
You're-
you don't want it to feel boardy?
But you may have to be boardy in the more casual atmosphere.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay.
Women don't wear skirts, wear pants. Just saying. Well, notice that these are all covered, thank you very much.
Then at least we know it will be on the back porch.
And that's going to start, that starts at 5?
Sure, the budget.
Yeah, then you just have the time all allocated. We'll get the agenda out to everybody.
All right, David.
Till about
So quick
8.
comment on, goes into the town hall. Steve mentioned earlier that at least Brian and I and Steve received this electronically, which is the facilities master plan. There were a few egregious comments that Steve wrote did he copy all of us on that?
Just Brian and
Okay,
David.
so Steve made comments back to Lowe's Design based on our input, and they're correcting those and redoing this. So as soon as that comes in, the entire board will see the report. Most of it is appendices, so the report itself is, what, 50 pages? 60? But there were a few things that, like, a number, and then in paren, it was a different number, so it's just fix those things.
And for purposes of the community, we will distribute the whole report, but it'll put them to sleep. So we said we'd come up with like 8 slides
slides.
that would tell the big picture story.
The big picture.
And then anybody who wants to read the details, God bless them,
It's
they can have
it's
it.
helpful.
Is that fair with everybody?
Helpful information. It's probably more than anyone's gonna read, other than a few of us.
So at that town,
That's going to be updated, that copy.
That's gonna be updated.
And-
We're going to throw away the old copy.
yeah, and for the town hall meeting, it is the intention to go through those 8 slides or so. And it'll kind of be the big picture of what's there. Thank everyone profusely for their participation and all that wonderful junk, and everybody can, you got it. And then on with life. And then they'll all want to know when they get their pickleball courts. So,
Debbie, do you have any more homework left?
all right, anything else for this meeting? Anybody? I thank you, this was a long one. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, and John. Thank you, audience.
Thank you, staff. Oh, my God. Well,
What just happened?
I was supposed to have a SAP meeting now, and then come back here for 6 o'clock.